Thank you for joining us. I'm Adriana Diaz. On Saturday, February 28th, the United States and Israel launched a sweeping joint attack on Iran, targeting the Islamic Republic and killing the Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. In response, Iran launched retaliatory attacks on Israel, U.S. targets in the region, and other neighboring countries. War has broken out in the Middle East. How did we get here? What led to the largest U.S. military buildup in the region in a generation, and the start of a war that currently has no end in sight? To understand the ongoing conflict, CBS News looked into our own archives. For 6 decades, 60 Minutes has covered every aspect of Iran and its conflict with the West. From Mike Wallace's memorable interview with Ayatollah Khomeini just days after the Iranian hostage crisis began, to Scott Pelley's recent interview with Reza Pahlavi, the son of the former Shah of Iran. 60 Minutes has told the stories of the Iranian people, their leaders, and how the current war has been years in the making. We begin in 1974. The Arab oil embargo caused gas shortages across the U.S. for months, driving up prices. Americans faced around-the-block lines when trying to fill up. Mike Wallace traveled to Tehran for his first interview with the leader of Iran, Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi.
Chances are your car is sat in your garage or driveway this weekend, and chances are that your local gas station is going to be closed a lot more Sundays this winter. What part does the Arab oil embargo play in all of this? One Middle East monarch thinks that you're being sold a bill of goods. To try to understand something of the background of the oil shortage, a 60 Minutes crew has spent the last 3 weeks in the Middle East, in Saudi Arabia and Iran, the 2 largest oil exporting countries in the world. Our story on Saudi Arabia is still in work, but in Iran, earlier this week, we went to see the man who runs that country and, in effect, its oil industry.
Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi is not an Arab. He makes a point of calling himself Aryan. And unlike the Arabs, he will sell oil to anyone if the price is right. Along with the Arabs, he is a member of OPEC, the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries. That's the group that is holding the world's feet to the fire with the rocketing price of oil. This week in Tehran, the Shah offered to put up $1 billion, and he can afford it, of his oil money, for a fund that would cushion the devastating economic effect of the oil crunch on the have-not nations. And he took time out in his Niavaran palace to talk to us.
Sheikh Yamani told me a week ago in Riyadh that he was very optimistic that during February there was going to come the disengagement between Syria and Israel and the oil embargo would be lifted. He was optimistic. That optimism obviously has turned sour. Why? Do you know?
Well, there might be many reasons. One is that I don't know why you attach so much importance to this embargo on the United States, really. Why should you care about that? You are not short of oil.
Have you seen the lines of cars stretching for blocks, in some cases for miles, waiting to get gas?
I have seen the pictures.
And you cannot get...
But you have imported more oil than any time in the past.
Well, not recently, we haven't.
You have?
You mean we are still importing more oil than we were, let's say, in September? You believe that?
I can't say for sure. But what is certain is that you are not importing less.
Than we were importing last September? Then this whole thing is a fraud?
You know that ships are changing their destinations 2 or 3 times in the oceans. You sell the oil for a certain destination and it ends up somewhere else.
What you seem to be saying is that there is some fraud involved, that there is something going on that doesn't meet the eye.
Oh, something is going on for sure.
And who is being enriched by it?
The oil companies.
The oil companies.
You know that one oil company has made 67% interest this year and another one even more?
Well, the president of Aramco acknowledges
Yes?
Not the president, the chairman of the board of Aramco acknowledged to us that their profits, the parent company, will go up by 400% next year, just as Iran's profits will go up by 400%.
Yes, but this is our wealth, our natural wealth. For them, it's only a question of manipulation.
As you know, I have been across the Gulf that you call Persian and they call Arabian.
Why do you call it Gulf? You have been to school, haven't you?
Yes.
What was the name that you have read during your school days?
Persian Gulf.
All right.
But they do call it Arabian Gulf.
Well, they can do many things.
And they find an irony in the oil situation in this. They say, we impose the embargo against the United States, for instance, and the European countries. That drives the cost of oil up. Who benefits from the embargo? Iran, the Shah. Shah, who is the friend of Israel, benefits from the high price of oil caused by our embargo.
Yeah, but only enemies of Iran could have told you that. First of all, why friend of Israel?
Why?
In what sense?
Or economic cooperation.
How much?
I don't know the extent of it.
It doesn't come even to $2 or $3 million a year.
Intelligence cooperation.
You can get that kind of intelligence even in reading American newspapers.
It is common knowledge that they trained or helped to train your secret police, the Savak. You do have a relationship with the Israelis, there's no doubt.
That's ridiculous, but we have the same relationship with all the friendly Arab countries that we train also in this country. This means nothing.
The industrial nations, among them, of course, the United States, feel that you, sir, have pushed too far, too fast, and that you can trigger worldwide depression by doing it. Henry Kissinger says so. Sheikh Yamani, the oil minister of Saudi Arabia, says so.
That suits him. I'm not talking about Yamani because I don't like to enter into that subject. But the others, it suits them to say that. Why? Because the price that we have set for oil was one of the lowest among the prices which were studied and suggested to the OPEC organization by all the experts.
You say you don't want to talk about Saudi Arabia and Sheikh Yamani. Well, nonetheless, Saudi Arabia, #1 oil producer, has certainly as great a stake as you do. And yet, he says, it's going to trigger depression. It's going to trigger trouble.
He has been told to say that. I'm sorry to say this.
By?
I'm not going to mention any names.
Well, by President Nixon?
I'm not going to mention any names. Ask the other member of the OPEC, all those experts in the OPEC, what they think.
What kind of pressure can somebody put upon Sheikh Yamani to say it, unless his own king says say it?
You just go and ask those people.
Is it going to go down? Is it going to go up? Is it going to stay the same? The cost of oil...
It's going to go certainly up because, unfortunately, your inflation is going to go up.
Is it going to go up on April 1st when...
This I can't say.
Well, you sit down with your OPEC brothers in the next few weeks, and you make a decision about the price of oil as of April 1st. Can you give us a horseback guess, Your Majesty?
I can't tell you, really. But all will depend on many factors. One is the attitude that the so-called industrial countries of the world are adopting. Is it a hostile attitude or a cooperative attitude?
You tell me, sir.
Second, it's the question of your inflation. The bill that they are every day presenting us is something ridiculous. The way that you are increasing your prices.
On?
Everything. Every kind of commodity.
For instance?
Say some spare parts for a radar station. That's only one little example. And from that you can go for everything.
Is it in retaliation for the rise of...
No, it's because they cannot control their economy.
But you can.
We can, and that's what we call your society a permissive society.
Is that that's not the only reason you call our society a permissive society?
Not the only reason.
Your Majesty.
Not the only reason.
Well, this is not a pretty subject to bring up to His Imperial Majesty, but there are those from the West who say, look at the corruption in Iran. with all of the money in your own affluent economy, in your own swollen economy, so much money sticks to the hands of people in the government. They say you can't get a contract here, and everybody's here. You know that, vendors, contractors, without a little of true?
I think it's the most unjust thing that is said. It's just jealousy. For instance, the military purchases, it's government to government. If there is a corruption, it's from your government or the government of every other country from which we buy. So this is the unfairest and most unjust thing that I have heard.
Is it possible, Your Majesty, that because you are so busy and because you have so many things occupying you, that it could be going on behind your back, sir?
No. It's impossible because I have at least 5 inspectorate organizations. One, sooner or later, they will be caught. And let me say this. First of all, I think this is a cheap accusation. Second, it is less than anything that you have in your so-called permissive society.
You mean you think there is more corruption in the United States than in...
Well, especially in your country, yes.
You are one of the longest ruling monarchs in the world today, Your Majesty. 33 years, you've survived assassination attempts, internal strife, external threats. Why?
Why did I survive?
Yes.
Well, I believe in God. Ask him.
You do?
I do.
I mean, very
seriously.
deeply.
Oh, yes. And I think this is the only explanation.
You have said the only explanation. You said, I will stay alive until I finish what I set out to do.
What was set for me to do.
By God.
That's what I believe.
When you were a little boy, you saw visions, you saw apparitions. God came to you, or God's messenger came to you.
Yes.
For some of us in the West, that is difficult to comprehend. But I say you believe it. You say it.
I do.
What happened?
Started by dreams, then apparitions and feelings, but all in 1 year, not more, between the age of 6 and 7. And then it stopped.
You have no more dreams, apparitions, visions now?
Sometimes I have dreams which come true and I don't like it.
Assassination attempts?
No, not that.
But you had premonition,
Not that. When I was a kid, once I dreamt that there was a pit full of snakes, and obviously people who are always translating the dreams told me that these are your enemies. Things like that. It happens to everybody, probably. But not that.
You sleep more soundly now?
With my sleeping pills, yes.
You take sleeping pills?
Since some time now. Well, it's really tranquilizers.
You know, very few leaders like yourself, Your Majesty, talk with the candor with which you have talked on television. Why? Why are you willing to?
First of all, I believe in what I say. Secondly, I'm not afraid of my people. It's not a political campaign. I'm not going to look at the polls tomorrow to see if I'm 2 degrees higher or lower. And that's because this confidence exists between me and my people. They trust in me, I trust in them. I believe that I know the job. So I'm not trembling in thinking or saying what I say, because I know that tomorrow I won't have to go to the polls.
Mike Wallace returned to Iran in 1976 to once again sit down with Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi. His candid conversation with the Shah touched on a number of topics, including Israel, American politics, and Iran's secret police force.
The Shah of Iran savors the power and the worldwide attention his oil has brought him. Unlike most autocratic leaders, as his ambition and his military muscle have grown, so has his willingness to talk to foreign reporters.
60 Minutes made its yearly pilgrimage to the Shah's palace in Tehran to canvass the royal views on assorted topics. Among them, our presidential election. He clearly favors Ford, though he will not say so publicly. He thinks Carter fails to fully comprehend Iran's role in the defense of American interests. On the Middle East, the Shah is committed to a secure state of Israel, but he insists the Israelis must give back the Arab lands they conquered in 1967, and he believes the Jewish lobby in the United States helps breed Israeli intransigence on that matter. In fact, he says, American presidents and presidential candidates are too quick to do the bidding of the Jewish lobby.
Surely, Your Majesty, you're not telling me that the Jewish lobby in the United States pulls the strings of the presidency?
Not entirely, but I think even a little too much, even for Israel interests.
You think the Jewish lobby in the United States is too powerful for the interests of Israel?
I think so. Sometimes they are disserving the interests of Israel
Explain.
because they're pushing around too many people.
How do you mean pushing around?
Well, pressuring, they have many means at their disposal. They are putting up pressure on many, many people. And at the end, I don't think that it will even help Israel.
Why, if this is true, why would the President of the United States pay attention to that lobby?
They are strong.
Strong in what sense?
They are controlling many things.
Controlling what?
Newspapers, medias,
Your Majesty.
banks, finances, and I'm going to stop there.
Well, now wait just a second. You really do believe that the Jewish community in the United States is that powerful? They make the media reflect their view of foreign policy?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
They do not report, we do not report honestly?
Don't mix things, please. I don't say the media. I say in the media they have people. Not the entire media. Some newspapers will only reflect their views, yes.
No? The New York Times, for instance, is owned by the Sulzberger family, who are Jewish. Are you suggesting that the New York Times is biased in its treatment of the question of Zionism, Israel's existence, the United States' relationship with the Arab world?
I will have to put all the articles of the New York Times written on this subject and draw the conclusion. You can put this to the computer and it will answer you.
What you're saying is that, yes, you do believe.
Well, let's wait for the answer of the computer.
Washington Post?
The same.
The networks?
Less.
I must say you are speaking with your characteristic candor.
Yes, if you like. I try to be candid. I have always been.
He was even-handed in his candor. Next, he turned to the Palestinians.
The Palestinians obviously had the sympathy of many, many people, almost all the countries in the world, persecuted people, stateless people, looking for a home or something.
Yeah.
You know, exactly like the sympathy that the Jews had when they were searching for a home.
Right.
But our good Palestinian friends must know that there is only a limit to where they can go and bully the world.
Bully the world?
Yes, by terrorism and blackmailing and this and that.
You know perfectly well, Your Majesty, that the leaders of the Arab world find the Palestinians as much a problem almost as the Israelis do. Isn't that a fact?
What I can say is that they should really open their eyes, reassert their situation. And if there is a hierarchy and someone there in command
Of the Palestinians, you mean?
of the Palestinians, to start a new policy, because the actual one is going to lead them nowhere.
With whom do they really have understanding? With Assad, with Sadat, with Hussein?
That's a very good question.
They have none with any of these leaders.
Not to my knowledge.
And they seem to be out of control.
It seems so today.
And what about the Arab leader who supports the Palestinians, the terrorists, with his oil money, Muammar Gaddafi of Libya?
He's crazy.
You really believe that?
Oh, yes, no doubt. The man is absolutely irresponsible and crazy.
We moved on to the subject of Iranian money and tales of monumental corruption, bribery, even in the royal family. Princess Ashraf is the Shah's sister.
Let me quote to you from a piece in the Washington Post. A wealthy Iranian businessman says, "Not a truck can move anywhere in this country without a payoff going to Princess Ashraf."
Who is this silly person who can believe that?
Why would you imagine this kind of thing would find its way into print?
First, you like to print those things. You newspaper people always must be sensational. And
You're satisfied?
One of your whipping boys today seems to be us in this country. So, you go for these things.
But so many stories like this have proved to be true.
They all were true except for my country.
Grumman was true.
Not here.
Northrop was true.
Not here.
How are you so sure? How can you be utterly sure? Because you speak with such assurance that it is not still going on in other arms.
The arms I choose. All the systems I choose. There is no need for middlemen.
And they're not bribing you?
Well, hopefully not.
We turn to the Shah's secret police force, his FBI and CIA combined. They are called SAVAK, and they have a reputation for brutality. He acknowledged that he has SAVAK agents on duty in the United States.
And they are there for the purpose of checking up on Iranian students?
Checking up on anybody who becomes affiliated with circles, organizations hostile to my country, which is the role of any intelligence organization.
And they are there with the knowledge and consent of the United States government?
I think it is.
The deputy director of SAVAK, a man by the name of Parvis Sabeti, is reported to have castigated the FBI for not keeping a closer watch on Iranian exiles and student groups in the United States. And according to that same report, he says the CIA is no help at all.
He said, oh yes,
he said it. He is also quoted as saying, "We'd better not talk about this, but we are fully aware of the situation of Iranian students abroad, especially those working in international communist activities." So you do have SAVAK agents.
Well, I hope so.
In the United States.
I hope everywhere to gather those informations.
Now, when an outfit like the International Commission of Jurists comes here and then comes out with a report saying that in spite of what you say, Your Majesty, torture continues.
How do they know? Well, they can't continue saying this. But they have even accused the Great Britain of acting against the human rights.
We're talking for the moment about your country.
They are putting us in the same category.
In other words, you're saying you do what every country does.
Sure.
If torture is necessary, you torture.
Not the torture in the old sense of torturing people, twisting their arms and doing this and that. But there are intelligent ways of questioning now.
Well, they talk about psychological and physical torture.
Physical, I don't believe.
I talked
not anymore. Maybe in the old days, maybe.
I talked just today to a man whom I believe, who told about torture.
He was tortured?
Yes.
And you believe that he was tortured?
Yes.
How many years ago?
Within, I want to be very careful, not yesterday.
Ah, well, maybe. I don't know.
The word has gone out to stop it.
To stop what?
Torture.
But a long time ago, yes.
How long ago?
Well, I won't tell you, as you don't tell me.
Are you aware of a CIA psychological profile about you, sir?
No, I must admit that it's the first time I hear that.
Truly?
Yes. What is it?
Would you be interested in hearing what the CIA had to say?
Yes, why not?
Really?
Yes, why not?
I have your permission?
Yes, sure.
You won't send me to the Savak if I ask?
No, I would spare you this terrible ordeal of going through torture.
This secret study portrays the Shah as a brilliant but dangerous megalomaniac who is likely to pursue his own aims in disregard of U.S. interests.
So how could I be your man, your agent,
How do you mean?
safeguarding your interests?
Well, it says that the Shah is an uncertain ally. His dreams of glory apparently...
I know. So you would like me to be your stooge?
Do you want me to go on, or shall I forget about this, Your Majesty?
Well, some funny points, why not?
So he went on to quote to him from the CIA profile. His dreams of glory, it said, apparently exceed his ability to finance them. When his oil revenues run out in an estimated 2 decades, he might use his new military power to seize some neighboring oil fields.
Shall I go on, or would you prefer that I stop, sir?
Well, the question is that I have now that you mentioned, I have seen that appearing in papers, but I think it's lots of imagination in that.
A criticism frequently voiced by American business people here, particularly in the last year or two, is this, Your Majesty. Iran does not pay its bills on time. Goods are delivered, services are rendered, but they have to wait and wait for their money. Surely you don't have cash flow problems, Your Majesty.
This is very new to me.
Oh, I've heard this over and over again.
Why don't they write to me?
Well, perhaps now that you're suggesting that they write to you, they will.
Sure.
They say months and months go by.
I can't believe that.
There is no cash flow problem, because you yourself confess that you are in deficit this year.
I don't think so. I don't think so. But this is worth looking after. And at least for once you're very useful, that through you we can reach these people and say, why don't they write to me?
You say, at least for once you are useful. Why? I'm curious. Why are you willing to sit and answer these questions?
Because I like these kind of provocations. It gives me the opportunity of clarifying things that unfortunately are said and not always answered.
When we come back, trouble in Iran, a country barreling toward revolution. You're watching 50 years of 60 Minutes Iran coverage. In 1978, just 1 year before the historic U.S. Embassy takeover in Tehran, Mike Wallace returned to Iran. On this visit, the usually candid Shah refused an interview, but Wallace did speak to Iranians who opposed his rule.
Iran, where we have spent this past week, is a country of immense significance to the United States. Her oil reserves, second largest in the world, the $15 billion worth of sophisticated American arms that she possesses, her strategic position in the Persian Gulf, her 1,300-mile border with the Soviet Union. All this means that when there is trouble in Iran, that is trouble for the United States. And there is big trouble in Iran now. The week began with riots, trashing, burning by the opposition to the Shah. It ended with the Shah's secret police, the Savak, arresting the major opposition figure inside the country, Karim Sanjabi, as he was about to call on the Shah to leave Iran to make way for a democratic Islamic state. There is discontent across the entire spectrum of the population of Iran. The oil workers have been on strike, though some came back today. Journalists are out to protest censorship. The school teachers are out. The universities are shut down. But it is the Muslim holy men who spearhead the opposition. And we begin our report in downtown Tehran at one of the headquarters of the Muslim movement. The people in this group are hiding their faces because they do not want to be able to be identified by Savak, by the people of the Shah. They are members of the Muslim movement, united in their determination to bring down the Shah. All of them are professional people or students at the university.
Why are you people so against the Shah? An outsider comes here. He sees buildings going up. He sees a certain amount of prosperity in the city. Iran moving into the 20th century. What's wrong with
Yes, an outsider who comes to Iran, who does definitely would not see what is going deeply within the people.
And that is?
And that is the misery, and that is injustice and lack of freedom.
Will the fighting go on until the Shah is out? Or do you think with the military government here in Iran now that you're going to have to bide your time for some months or some years?
I think the fighting will go on. And they will fight till their last drop of blood.
Naturally, we wanted to talk to the Shah about what these dissidents had to say. But though he is ordinarily the most accessible of leaders, he would say nothing. But the last time we talked with him, 2 years ago at his Niavaran palace, he was pleased to speak of the bond between him and his people.
I'm not afraid of my people. It's not a political campaign. I'm not going to look at the polls tomorrow to see if I'm 2 degrees higher or lower. And that's because this confidence exists between me and my people. They trust in me, I trust in them. I believe that I know the job, so I'm not trembling.
But last Sunday, had his people been polled, the Shah would have been dismayed at the results. For thousands of Iranians, most of them young, rampaged through the streets of Tehran, shouting down with the Shah, death to the Shah. There was genuine fury here. A protest not simply for political freedom, but against low wages and high inflation, against huge military expenditures, against corruption and foreign influence. Caught up in this orgy of burning and destruction were not only the Muslim militants, but others beside them, students, workers, and of course some hooligans bent on a violent holiday. But it was rumored that in the chaos of the day, paid government agents were here too, torching some of the buildings, hoping to spawn a backlash against the mob to give the government license to crack down. Also torched last Sunday was what is now this pile of rubble. 4 days ago, it was the headquarters building of the National Iranian Gas Company. It went unprotected by the Iranian military, by the Tehran Police Department, by the Tehran Fire Department. And yet, just 200 yards down Roosevelt Boulevard here is the American Embassy compound. As you can see, not a dime's worth of damage done inside. Why? Because the American Embassy compound was protected by Iranian military police. It was one of the few buildings in Tehran to be so protected. It was apparent that the Shah was expressing gratitude for the support offered him by President Carter. Within 24 hours of Sunday's mayhem, tanks and troop carriers rolled. The civilian prime minister was replaced by a military government. Tehran became a very quiet city. The military had moved not only against the rioters, but equally, in effect, against this venerable holy man sitting thousands of miles away in a Paris suburb. Ayatollah Ruhollah Khomeini is a churchman who has spent 15 years in exile from Iran. He condemns the Shah's corruption and dictatorship and attacks the United States for supporting him. When he speaks, millions of Iranians listen. He tells them the Shah should be arrested, tried for crimes against the state, and ousted, and that a Muslim state should be established. Since there have been no opposition political figures to whom the masses could turn, they looked instead to their holy men for political leadership.
It's been a period of great social upheaval. Thousands of migrants have left villages to come and work in urban areas.
Iranian scholar Dr. Shah Bakash.
Young men and women have been picked out from villages and small towns and entered universities in urban centers. People are working in new occupations. The family structure is being put under great pressure. Naturally, at times like these, people cling to what is more familiar. They go back to their traditional beliefs.
But it is by no means just the traditional Muslims who oppose the Shah. It is some of the new rich, too, the new middle class, who have been the chief beneficiaries of Iran's economic boom. Coveys of millionaires have been spawned here the past half a dozen years. But there are many among the bourgeoisie who are repelled now by the ostentatious luxury and by the flagrant corruption. And besides that, they don't want to live as political eunuchs, forbidden to indulge in political give and take.
They have become richer, which is natural. Nowadays, they can send their children to school, they have enough to eat, but they want also another right, the right to be able to speak freely and to choose their elected government.
Javan Alamir is a wealthy businessman and politician. All right, Mr. Alamir, please tell me, what is so horrid about the Shah?
What is so horrid about the Shah? It's the terrible thing that has happened in Iran during the last quarter of century. We had the worst repression known in the history.
You mean that the repression, the torture, the cruelty of the Savak under
the regime during the last 25 years
has been worse than
anywhere in the world. And you have to add to that the corruption, which was on a scale never equaled in the history. I mean, by percentage of the national wealth, what has gone to the corruption, what has gone because of the corruption to foreign and local companies is something unbelievable. And the figures are there.
But isn't it a fact that many Iranians prospered under the Shah?
We believe that 85% of the earning of the nation went to 5% of the population. The majority of the population was not even touched by what is called the wave of the petrodollars. Still in the last 5 years, people in the Khuzestan, in the Sistan and the Mokran provinces, in southeast and southwestern west of Iran, are dying of hunger. People in Mokran and in Sistan, they do not have the minimum requirement of calorie per day.
Yeah, but those aren't the people who are in the streets here in Tehran last week. Those are people who are living in apartments, who are going to school, who have the opportunity to go to the university, who are driving cars. The traffic in this town is as bad as any place in the world. One senses that particularly in Tehran, there's a certain degree of prosperity.
Exactly. The revolution which happened in Tehran, it's not a communist or a socialist revolution. It is a liberal revolution. The people who are revolting are the people, the new middle class people.
The Shah, who had in years past, as these pictures show, been preoccupied with his military might, who has one of the most powerful military machines in the world, told his nation this past week that he has heard their demands. He has already cut back on military purchases. He told them that his military government is only a temporary measure, looking forward to free elections. And he went on television to promise that the excesses and corruption of the past will stop.
It is from real estate developments like this one going up in North Tehran that the Shah's family is said to have enriched itself illegally over the years. But this past week, the Shah has moved apparently to try to prove to critics that he is serious about cleaning up corruption here. First, he has appointed a commission to look into the dealings of the Pahlavi Foundation, his family's foundation, and to look into the personal financial dealings of members of the royal family. If it is found that there has been illegalities involved, the money, the Shah has said, will be turned back to the people of Iran. And over 50 men who have been leading figures in the political and business establishment here have either been arrested or warrants issued for their arrest. Included is a former prime minister, a former head of the Savak, the secret police, and a former chief of Iran Air. He is reported to have committed suicide. It remains to be seen just what action will be taken against those named and charged.
There's a huge American community here, perhaps 45,000, but at least 3,000 of them have left in recent weeks. They're scared. Bill Layfeld has lived here 10 years. He's president of the Iran-American Chamber of Commerce.
I understand that there have been threats against Americans, against their lives, those who stay on.
There have been threats, but not just against Americans. It's an anti-foreign, generally, feeling, not just specifically directed towards us.
And how are these threats delivered?
Well, on occasion by telephone, on occasion by leaflets passed out on the street, and in some cases letters.
And what do they say? Get out?
Get out in a certain amount of time, or else. Now, what the or else means, we don't know.
Should the Shah survive?
It is in the interest of the nation for the time being, yes.
To
and
survive.
If it changes, I think we want a monarch.
Not as dictator, but as constitutional monarch.
As a dictator, he should not survive.
As a constitutional monarch? A figurehead?
A head of state.
In other words, you need the Shah.
We need the monarchy.
You find it difficult to say you need the Shah. You need the monarchy.
Yes. We need a monarch, we need a ruler, we need a king who abides by the Constitution. If the Shah abides by the Constitution, we will be for him.
And do you believe that he has now seen the light, that he will abide by the Constitution?
We hope.
Mr. Alamir's hope for a constitutional monarchy would seem futile for now, inasmuch as the Shah's military government is still cracking down hard on dissidents, while much of the opposition remains unrelenting in their demand that the Shah step down. Incidentally, a few hours ago, we talked by telephone with a longtime member of the Shah's imperial court who is now in a foreign capital, and he told us that tomorrow he will assert publicly that the Shah had personal and direct knowledge of the torture and killings of Iranian dissidents by the Savak, and that such Savak activities had the full approval of the Shah. The Iranian official said that he will ask for asylum in the country where he intends to make his public statement.
Ahead, revolution, the hostage crisis, and Mike Wallace's extraordinary interview with Ayatollah Khomeini. In 1979, long brewing tensions exploded in Iran. Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi left the country in exile, and the Ayatollah seized control. Iran went from a secular monarchy to an anti-Western theocracy. Angry militants seized the U.S. embassy, taking 52 Americans hostage. 2 weeks after the embassy takeover, Mike Wallace interviewed the Ayatollah.
Iran's Ayatollah Khomeini today was interviewed by Mike Wallace, the first interview by an American reporter since the ordeal of hostages began. The interview came early during a day in which later 3 hostages were put on display, pending their promised release, and amid reports that the Ayatollah and others now were mentioning possible trials for remaining hostages if the former Shah of Iran is not handed over by the United States. During the interview, you sometimes will hear an interpreter translating from our studios in New York. At other times, you will hear the official interpreter present at the interview with written answers to some of the questions which we had to submit in advance.
If there is some turmoil in Tehran, there was none apparent this morning in the holy city of Qom, 100 miles to the south. There, guarded by a lone soldier on a rooftop, is the modest compound of the Ayatollah Khomeini. This morning, in his reception room, the ground rules for the interview were carefully spelled out. No question could be asked unless it was approved ahead of time. No questions about Iran's internal politics. No questions about a lack of freedom under the Ayatollah. But there seemed no pattern to those questions that were disallowed. About half of those we proposed were simply forbidden. The interpreter said he would refuse even to ask the Ayatollah any questions that he, the interpreter, deemed inappropriate. To begin with, of course, we wanted to learn about the hostages held in the American embassy compound.
Do you still say, Imam, that if the Shah, the ex-Shah, is not returned to Iran, that those American hostages in the American embassy compound will not be freed?
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim.
In the name of God, the most merciful and gracious. This issue has to do with the people. The 35 million population of Iran want this, and we must investigate why the population wants the Shah returned. And unless he is returned, the hostages will not be freed.
Then, reading from a prepared text, the Ayatollah's official interpreter said, "The Shah has to return and tell us where his money is, and we have to know the extent of his treason against our people."
Reasons for the people's insistence for the Shah's return. One, that this is a nation with a poor economy, that the wealth of these people have been plundered by the Shah and his relatives, have been taken out of the country, are being deposited in various US and European banks. And these are the monies which indeed belong to the people, to these poor people.
Right.
And therefore, he has to come, he has to return and tell us where are these monies and why they are there. The second, which is even more important than the first reason, is that we want him back to show the extent of the crimes committed by this person during 37 years of his rule. We have to know the extent of his treasons in this country. This is why that he has to return and he has to be tried, and then the courts will decide.
But that is not an answer to whether the hostages will be freed.
I just gave an answer. The people will it, and we can't go against this will.
Then the hostages will remain there in the American Embassy compound, what, for life? Forever?
They will remain until the Shah is returned. It is in the hands of Carter. Carter can free them by returning the Shah.
Imam, President Carter accuses your government of practicing terrorism and says that your regime will be held accountable if those U.S. hostages are harmed.
The 35 million people of Iran are terrorists? Ask Carter. You interpret politics like this? You call our people terrorists? I have heard what Carter says of them, and it doesn't make sense. He says they are not students, they are bums, mobs, they are terrorists. You know these as terrorists? This is an insult to students and people across the nation. You consider our people terrorists? You understand them of politics? Is that we are a nation of terrorists? We are Muslims. This is an insult.
Imam, President Sadat of Egypt, a devoutly religious man, a Muslim, says that what you are doing now is, quote, a disgrace to Islam. And he calls you, Imam, forgive me, his words, not mine, a lunatic. I know that you have heard that comment. That's what I heard President Sadat say on American television.
Yes.
That the Imam is a disgrace to Islam,
yes.
And he used the word a lunatic.
Sadat
Sadat states he is a Muslim, and we are not. He is not, for he compromises with the enemies of Islam. Sadat has united with our enemies. Sadat knows well what is occurring south of Lebanon and with the Palestinians. He knows the crimes of Israel. Yet he still considers Begin a friend and himself a Muslim. You must try to evaluate what he is doing, then through Islam. The Egyptian people do not back Sadat.
And once again, the official interpreter reading from his prepared text.
I demand that Egyptian people try to overthrow him just as we did with the Shah.
He calls upon the Egyptian people to overthrow Sadat.
He does.
The way the Iranian people overthrew the Shah.
Exactly.
What we hear, Imam, that today, perhaps today, some black hostages and some female hostages will be released from the American Embassy compound. Is that true?
The freedom of the women and blacks will be given. Women are given great dignity in Islam, and the blacks have been oppressed in the United States. Great injustice was done unto them. They were under pressure in the United States. Thus they came here. We are doing this owing to the tenets of Islam. In return, we ask nothing for their freedom. We want the Shah. Carter must return him. The world's international law agree with this principle.
I ask you, as an American and a human being, talking to an Iranian and another human being, is there no room for compromise? Or is Iran now, in effect, at war with the United States?
I'm sorry, I can't ask that first question because that one was crossed out. Hazrat
Imam, is Iran, in effect, at war with the United States now?
Hazrat Imam, آیا جناب عالی یا به طور کلی ایران در حال حاضر با امریکا در حال جنگ هستیم؟
جنگ مقصود چی است؟ اگر مقصود این است که
What do you mean by war? If you mean our armies against the United States armies, no, there is no such war. If you mean it is a battle of nerves, it is Carter's doing. We are against war. We are Muslims. We desire peace for all. Carter does not allow this. Carter should put aside his so-called humanism and return the criminal Shah so that we can conclude this matter. The Shah is a criminal. We all know this. This spy nest you call the US Embassy then can be returned to a place of humanism and diplomacy. Carter must return the Shah. We have nothing against the people of the United States.
But if the president says he refuses to return the Shah, and if the Imam says he will not free the hostages, then what can be the answer?
Well, I'm not sure if I can get the answer because this was not in the question.
Please ask him. I'm sure it's a very simple, straightforward question.
شما البته طبق معمول اجباری نیست جواب لطفاً بفرمایید چون اینا تو اینا نیستش. ولی این سوالی که میکنن تو اینها نیستش.
He will not discuss
He's not even going to listen to it because it's not in the here.
All right. If the Imam was so convinced that the U.S. Embassy was a spy center, why did he not close it down and break off relations with the United States? Why did he wait for this group of young Iranians to take it over?
We didn't think an embassy could be a center of spying. I didn't realize this until our students found the necessary evidence. I didn't realize Carter, going against all international law tenets, would allow this spying and conspiracy at the American embassy. Now that our students have done this, taken the embassy, with the backing of all the people of Iran, we have now realized that the American embassy has been a center for spying.
Imam, would you permit me to go to the American embassy compound and talk to the hostages who are there?
Okay. Yes, you could.
I can go.
It does not matter. Allow him to go and observe. Our young are there, and they will show him that the Americans are safe and healthy. There is no problem in going. They are under protection, and nothing will occur to them. Islam protects the prisoner, and Islam is humane. We are Muslims. Our students are Muslim students. They will protect the prisoners. I have asked my son to observe and ensure their safety. He reported to me that they are all well. I personally wish and hope for their safety. The prisoners at the United States Embassy must ask Carter to allow the Shah to return, so they may again gain their freedom.
Well, despite that, Mike Wallace was not allowed into the embassy. But this afternoon, Iranians brought 3 of the hostages before cameras for what they called a brief news conference. The 3 were Catherine Gross of Cambridge Springs, Pennsylvania, a part-time embassy secretary, and 2 Marine sergeants, Liddell Maples of Errol, Arkansas, and William Quarles of Washington, D.C. These 3 Americans, it was said, would be released later. Whether they are the only 3 to be released was not made explicitly clear.
More than 100 days into the Iranian hostage crisis, 60 Minutes examined why so many Iranians supported holding 52 Americans against their will.
Today is the 120th day the American hostages have been held captive in Tehran. And today marks the end of the first week of the UN Tribunal's investigation into the alleged crimes of the deposed Shah. They have been asked also to investigate Iranian charges of U.S. complicity in those acts. Why do so many Iranians believe in U.S. complicity, guilt? Why do they so fervently endorse the anti-American Khomeini and the holding of the hostages? Of course, we know the embassy takeover was triggered by the Shah's entry into the U.S. last October for medical treatment. More about that later. But beyond that, the fury in Iran focuses on the undenied fact that the CIA restored the exiled Shah to the peacock throne back in 1953. And after that, the Iranians have been told, the CIA helped the Shah set up Savak, the secret police force that has tortured so many thousands of them. A classified Senate Foreign Relations Committee report confirms the CIA's role in forming Savak. It says the CIA provided the Shah money as well as training for that purpose. Of course, the brutality came later. In 1976, in Niavaran Palace in Tehran, I asked the Shah about the continuing reports of torture inflicted by his Savak upon so many of his citizens. Now, when an outfit like the International Commission of Jurists comes here and then comes out with a report saying that in spite of what you say, Your Majesty, torture continues.
How do they know? Well, they can't continue saying this.
Well, they talk about psychological and physical torture.
Physical, I don't believe.
I talked
not anymore. Maybe in the old days, maybe.
I talked just today to a man whom I believe, who told about torture.
How many years ago?
Within, I want to be very careful, not yesterday.
Ah, well, maybe. I don't know.
The word has gone out to stop it.
To stop what?
Torture.
But a long time ago, yes.
How long ago?
Well, I won't tell you, as you don't tell me.
This was the man who had told me just hours before my interview with the Shah in the fall of 1976,
who told me about torture still going on, Raji Samgabadi, then a highly respected Iranian journalist who now reports for Time magazine. I spoke to him in New York a few days ago.
When you told me back in 1976, October,
Yes.
that torture, physical torture, was still going on, how did you know it?
My brother was released from jail perhaps a week before I saw you. There were torture marks all over his body. The physical torture went on, and the psychological torture was worse than physical torture. My own brother, a political prisoner, was taken once to this dark room and shown the mangled bodies of a few persons, and he was told that relatives of his, including his brother, including his mother and his father, were among the corpses. And he was instructed to identify them. So he spent hours and hours and hours trying to decide whether the stump of a head, the smashed pulp of a face, belonged to his brother, to his mother.
You mean you?
Yes. And this was a deliberate lie, but he didn't know. So through a series of psychological tortures, as His Majesty said, they drove him crazy, insane, and he came out. Thousands and thousands of dollars went into his treatment, and even now I can't say that he is a complete human being.
Raji Samgabadi spoke then of an episode that took place on the occasion of President Carter's visit to Tehran on New Year's Eve, December 1977.
We were celebrating the New Year's Eve with the American press in the Hilton Hotel, and Mr. Carter was given a speech that night saying, I don't remember the words exactly, but he was saying that America has never had such a good friend. America has never been so close with another nation, with another leader, and it profoundly touches us that the Shah takes care of his people so well, and his people love him so well.
On that very night, New Year's Eve, said Samgabadi, his brother was seized with another fit, and he brought him to a mental hospital close to the Shah's palace.
And a doctor there told me that 70% of our cases are Savak-tortured people. It is 1978, about 2 years, perhaps 15 months after your talk with the Shah and after his claim that torture is not going on.
Max McCarthy, three-term Democratic congressman, now Washington bureau chief of the Buffalo News, was press officer at the American Embassy in Tehran in '76. He had put me in touch with Samgabadi.
Raji Samgabadi told us about his brother. Did you know the brother?
I did.
And?
He was in prison, tortured, and I saw him afterward, and the poor guy was just a walking dead man. I mean, he was a zombie.
As a result of torture at the hands of Savak.
Right.
A trial of two Savak torturers held in Iran after the fall of the Shah. One of a score of such trials during which these men and others confessed to heinous crimes, sticking hot iron bars in noses and eyes, hanging prisoners upside down to beat them, using everything from thick whips to electric shock, raping both male and female prisoners, torturing one member of a family in front of the other. Often victims were then forced to swallow cyanide tablets or taken out and shot. Some other victims, like this young Iranian we filmed a few weeks ago in a London hospital, were permanently crippled. Over 3 years in an Iranian prison, he was apparently subjected to repeated spinal injections, another form of torture. He is paralyzed, unable to talk. Doctors say he soon will die.
Is it your understanding that we, you in the embassy, knew what was going on with Savak?
Well, I did.
In fact, it was such acts by Savak and the indifference of the American diplomatic establishment in Iran to such savagery that caused Max McCarthy to resign as press officer there in late 1976, and he wrote a report following his resignation.
In your report, you say, U.S. mission personnel are regularly warned not to divulge to any American correspondent information that Iranian government does not want disclosed or which tells too much about the U.S. role in Iran. You serious?
That's right.
In other words, Dick Helms, as ambassador, would say, look, the U.S. role in Iran, we don't want too much news of that in the American press.
Correct.
Ambassador Helms was pro-Shah.
Right. Well, he used to say there's no alternative to the Shah.
Which I suppose at that time Americans generally believed. And so in being pro-Shah, you did what the Shah wanted you to do, in effect.
Right. There was that was a very prevalent idea, giving the Shah what he wants, remember? There were articles to that effect.
And why was it so important to give the Shah what he wants?
Well, because he was our pillar in the Persian Gulf, and we built our whole security on this one man.
All right. Therefore, if the Shah committed excesses,
we had to forgive that.
If we knew about corruption that went on?
Right. There were more transcendently important considerations than corruption and repression.
So the United States knew really what was going on, but was willing to say, well, wait a minute, for the greater good of the greater number of people, let's turn our back on these brutalities, excesses, corruptions.
I believe that's a fair statement.
It was not just in Iran in the late 70s that Americans knew what was going on. Jesse Leaf was Iran analyst for the CIA in Langley, Virginia in the early 70s. He had heard reports of Savak brutalities, and he wanted to do something about it.
And in fact, at one point, I was going to write a report on torture in Iran, and I was told not to.
By?
On division level.
This was in what year?
It was in, I can't give you an exact year. I believe it was 70, 71, something like that.
Well, who was the head of the CIA at the time?
Well, the head of the CIA at the time was Richard Helms, but...
he would have known about?
Well, you'd either have to be blind, deaf, and dumb and a presidential candidate not to know there was torture going on in Iran. I mean, it was all over the place. Amnesty International has a huge file on what happened. I have seen from various, I saw from various sources descriptions of torture rooms in Savak headquarters in Tehran. We knew it was happening, and we did nothing about it, and I was told not to do anything about it. This was an internal Iranian affair. Savak's job was to keep the lid on dissident elements within the population. Originally it was communist, then it meant anybody who looked crosswise at the Shah.
Mm-hmm.
By definition, Mike, an enemy of the Shah was an enemy of the CIA. We were very close. We were friends. This was a very close relationship between the United States and Iran.
What do you know, Mr. Leaf, about the CIA, Savak, and torture?
When the agency set up Savak, they had regular instructional classes. Part of the instructional classes were in interrogation techniques. As part of intensive interrogation techniques, torture is covered.
That, Leaf says, was a classroom lecture. Although one former Savak agent still in Iran claims the CIA actually showed Savak agents how to physically torture prisoners.
I think it's baloney, especially coming from the source. I mean, he's working for the other side now.
You mean he's testifying in order to save his own life?
Oh, I think so. We didn't have to teach the Iranians torture. I mean, or to torture people. They have a long, glowing history in that part of the world of torture. It's an everyday thing.
So far, we've been talking about Savak in Iran. But what about Savak outside Iran? Like our own CIA, Savak also conducted operations abroad. Here is a vivid example. We first told this tale 3 years ago on 60 Minutes. It centered on this man then living in Paris, Jules Kanpira, an adventurer, a soldier of fortune. Born in the Soviet Union, he lived clandestinely in Western Europe, a stateless man, in and out of prison several times, until finally he was granted an Iranian passport and went to work as a journalist in Tehran. Then he says he was contacted by Savak and sent back to France on a mission of political assassination. His first target was to be Sadek Gobsadek, the man who is now Iran's foreign minister, but who, when we first met him 3 years ago in Paris, was a little-known supporter of an Iranian religious leader then in exile in Iraq, the Ayatollah Khomeini. Kanpira, instead of killing Gobsadek, told him the whole story, and told him also that he had been commissioned by Savak to kill another man, an American, Nasser Afshar, a wealthy businessman, formerly an Iranian, now an American citizen, whose home was in Alexandria, Virginia, where he published the Iran Free Press, a newspaper filled with attacks against the Shah, his regime, and his family.
Why would the Savak want to kill you, Nasser Afshar?
Because I'm the publisher of Iran Free Press.
Simple as that.
Simple as that.
My dear friend Mike, I think this is very ridiculous.
Ardeshir Zahedi today lives in exile in Switzerland. At the time of our report on Savak 3 years ago, he was Iran's ambassador to the United States.
We are not the people who want to kill anyone. We had traitors in the past. Many of them has come back, even the communists.
But when we checked out Kanpira's story 3 years ago, it stood up. We were satisfied he was telling the truth, though every government agency we talked to at the time denied it. The State Department, the CIA, no one knew anything about it, or so they said.
And there the matter stood until the Senate Foreign Relations Committee investigated the activities of foreign intelligence organizations in the United States, including Savak. We have secured a portion of that classified report from Dale Van Atta of Jack Anderson's staff, and it confirms Kanpira's story in every detail. It says the CIA had known of the Afshar assassination plot for more than a year prior to our broadcast, that the Bureau of Intelligence and Research of the State Department had been told about it by the CIA, and that the U.S. Embassy in Iran had also indicated that one Jules Kanpira had been trained in assassination techniques. Though Kanpira never operated in the United States, a network of Savak agents did. How did we learn that? From the Shah of Iran himself when I spoke to him in 1976.
And they are there for the purpose of checking up on Iranian students?
Checking up on anybody who becomes affiliated with circles, organizations hostile to my country, which is the role of any intelligence organization.
And they are there with the knowledge and consent of the United States government?
I think it is.
That statement caused a flap. Henry Kissinger categorically denied U.S. knowledge of Savak activity here, but he promised to make inquiries. 2 weeks later, his aide, Robert Funseth, announced that after an investigation, the State Department had, quote, found no evidence of any illegal or improper activity. Well, that was totally misleading, as the Senate report makes clear. The report confirms that Savak's primary function in the United States was to spy on Iranian dissidents like these students, who could be targets for Savak upon their return to Iran. And the report says also that the CIA itself furnished Savak with information gathered by the FBI. Training of Savak personnel continued in the U.S., and the CIA did not ask that Savak refrain from using, in the United States, the surveillance techniques it learned here. And during the Carter years, Savak activity continued here. In July of '78, according to the Washington Post, then Deputy Attorney General Civiletti warned Zbigniew Brzezinski that Savak was involved in significant police, security, and non-diplomatic activity in the U.S. But there is no indication, the Post said, that Brzezinski made any move to tighten control over Savak's actions. Why the reluctance of the United States to crack down on Savak, or even to send its agents home? 3 years ago, Ambassador Zahedi answered my question about that quite candidly.
And if the U.S. government tells Iran to pull its Savak agents out of this country?
If the United States government does not want it, we are not going to insist, and we shall ask them to leave. At the same time, we shall ask your people to leave my country.
That threat, coming from the Shah himself, was repeated many times to U.S. officials in documents we have seen. The United States was not willing to pay that price. Iran was a vital listening post for the CIA, with 1,000 miles and more of border with the Soviet Union. Former CIA officer, now political science professor Richard Cottam explains.
The fact that the Shah allowed our watching operations from Iran, monitoring operations, terribly important to us. But I'd say more generally that wherever you have this kind of liaison relationship with another service like Savak, that the hold they have over you is very substantial.
Our support for Iran meant turning a blind eye to the excesses of the Shah, and according to Cottam, it meant failing to recognize the mounting opposition to the Shah inside Iran, and he holds Henry Kissinger responsible.
He coined the phrase total commitment. Why look at a minor group of opposition people and gratuitously annoy the Shah when the operations that we do jointly are so important to both countries?
What you seem to be saying, Professor Cottam, is that when the question, who lost Iran, is finally asked, Henry Kissinger is at the top of your culprits list.
I think Henry Kissinger's idea of diplomacy in this sense is intolerable. I believe that you should never be in a position of not reading the full breadth of public opinion in any country. And Kissinger to cut us off entirely from a major popular force, I think is to a very extensive extent responsible for a lot of what's happened, yes.
Two events in 1978 infuriated and unified the legions who opposed the Shah. The January massacre in the holy city of Qom by Savak and the Iranian police, and then as the opposition to the Shah solidified, the tragic fire in the Rex Theater in Abadan in August. Hundreds died in that fire, allegedly set by Savak, either to capture or kill several key agents of the Khomeini revolution known to be inside. A man charged with some responsibility for those two episodes was Reza Razmi, said by the present Iranian embassy in Washington to be a Savak agent. He was police chief in Qom in January and in Abadan in August. Reza Razmi, do you know the name?
Yes.
Who?
Used to be the police chief of the city of Qom. He committed great atrocities there, had people shot on the streets, and he was taken to Abadan and promoted to a general's rank because he had performed gallant duty. And in Abadan, during his tenure there as the police chief of the city, the Rex cinema fire, a very controversial fire, broke out, in which about 600 people, 500 people, I don't exactly remember, a huge number, died.
Were incinerated?
Incinerated. Policemen actually prevented the people from breaking a hole into the wall or somehow breaking the walls down or the doors down and getting the people out.
Today, that former chief of police, Reza Razmi, lives under an alias in Fresno, California. We found him there and tried to talk to him, but he refused. We learned he had entered the United States in January of '79. The Iranians have protested to the State Department what they call Razmi's asylum here. They say they want him back in Tehran for trial. And the State Department acknowledges that an informal protest was lodged with Secretary Vance last October by Iran's then Foreign Minister Ibrahim Yazdi, and that Vance promised to look into the matter but said he would need evidence on which to proceed. Both sides agree the Iranians have yet to produce that evidence. The CIA refused us any comment whatsoever on Razmi, but the FBI told us they had learned the date of his entry into the port of New York, and after he settled in California, they said, Razmi called the CIA for protection. The FBI said the CIA had referred him to them, and the FBI office in San Francisco referred him to the local police. So the Razmi mystery remains, and he remains in Fresno. We should make it clear that no one we have spoken to, Iranian or American, has suggested there was any collusion between American authorities and the Shah's officials to arrange for Razmi's entry into the United States in January of '79. Joseph Sisko is today Chancellor of American University in Washington. But for 25 years, he was in the State Department, his last chore as Undersecretary to Henry Kissinger. And though he acknowledges the excesses that took place in Iran, he says there is another side to the story, the accomplishments of the Shah, that too many people are right now unwilling to credit.
What I'm trying to suggest to you is, in the present emotional environment, take in Iran, do you think that either the Commission or the people in Iran, the leadership in Iran, are able today to look at this in the context of 25 years of Iranian-American relationships? The very fact that the Iranian-US relationship provided a certain umbrella for Iran to permit the country to develop economically, to permit education to be broadened, to permit land reform, to permit a new industrial class. In other words, for there to be 20 or 25 years of progress towards bringing Iran to a modern state.
If that is true, I ask Sisko, Why did the Iranians overthrow the Shah? Why do they apparently hate him so?
Number of reasons. One, no real opportunity for political expression. Secondly, a certain amount of repression. Third, there's no question, Mike, that in and around the throne, corruption had developed. I don't say there weren't grievances. I think it's important, however, as we look at this, to look at both the positive and the negative elements.
Understood.
And we share a measure of responsibility. I don't either condone.
How much of a measure of responsibility do you think that we bear?
Very difficult, because what has developed is the myth of American control in relationship to Iran, or for that matter, to third world countries.
Let me read to you from a Senate Foreign Relations Committee report with which I'm sure you're familiar. In the 1970s, 3 or 4 CIA officials met weekly with their SAVAK counterparts to discuss common interests. This was at a time when it was well known that SAVAK agents in the United States, according to this same once secret Senate report, said, significant police, security, and non-diplomatic political activity is carried out by SAVAK in the United States, including, quote, the planned assassination of a U.S. citizen by a man who told the CIA he had been tasked by SAVAK to kill a U.S. citizen. Just one example.
Well, you can't possibly condone anything like that, and I don't know of anyone who does.
Just today, we are doing this interview on Monday, February 25th, right? Just today, Mr. Sisko, Iran's President Ahmadinejad said that he's amazed at the naivete of the United States, of U.S. officials, and said that America still fails to understand the revolution that overthrew the Shah. To break Tehran's American hostage stalemate, says President Ahmadinejad, the United States could clear the unfavorable climate in relations between the two nations by conceding to Iran 3 demands. This according to President Ahmadinejad. They are admission of U.S. past wrongs, a pledge not to interfere in our internal affairs and future, and agreeing not to block our efforts to get back the Shah and the wealth of Iran he embezzled. Are those demands you're a trained diplomat. Are those so unacceptable?
Mike, in this situation, there can only be one negotiator, and that is the President of the United States.
And he's vowed never to apologize.
Who has all of the information at his disposal. Grievances, yes, they can be aired and they can be discussed, but not in circumstances while 50 Americans are paying the price.
They did not have the right to take the hostages, because hostage taking, in my book and in my value system, is thoroughly condemned. The American people do not owe it to the Iranians, okay, to come out and confess guilt, as you say. They owe it to themselves. They owe it to their Constitution. They owe it to the concept of America as a citadel of democracy and freedom.
Do you think that we are wrong to bring out this material for the American public at this time?
No, I don't think that you're wrong in bringing out this material at this time. The reason why I was anxious to talk to you in response to your query is that I felt that this material is quite relevant, but it's important that this material be evaluated by the American public, by the world, within the broad context of Iranian-American relationships, without condoning it. I'm not condoning these actions, as you well know, but within the broad context of Iranian-U.S. relations, as well as the positive benefits to the West and to the Iranian people over a period of a quarter of a century. Like 6 presidents and 6 secretary of states just can't be totally wrong.
Nevertheless, it was the decision of this president and this secretary of state, their decision to permit the Shah to enter the United States last October, that triggered the capture of the embassy and the taking of the hostages, a decision about which they'll have some tough questions to answer once the hostages are free. For example, was the admission of the Shah to the United States an instant response to the plea of a desperately sick man? Not according to a State Department contingency document, classified, secret sensitive, and entitled planning for the Shah to come to the United States. Written 3 months before the Shah's arrival, it says that once the Khomeini regime is firmly established, quote, it seems appropriate to admit the Shah to the United States. 3 months later, he arrived, presumably for emergency medical treatment. But Washington had been warned by the embassy in Tehran. A cable from the chargé there said, I doubt that the Shah being ill would have much ameliorating effect on the degree of reaction here. About that reaction, the State Department reported spelled out the danger of hostages being taken, and went on, when the decision is made to admit the Shah, we should quietly assign additional American security guards to the embassy to provide protection for key personnel until the danger period is considered over. According to Henry Precht, head of the Iranian desk in the State Department, those guards were never provided. And finally, on the issue of whether the Iranians had assured the Americans that they would protect the embassy if the Shah were to come to the United States, the Americans say the Iranians pledged they would. But yesterday, Iran's former foreign minister, Ibrahim Yazdi, told me that when informed officially just 24 hours before the arrival of the Shah in New York, Yazdi says he warned the State Department, you are playing with fire. There will be a very drastic reaction. And on that subject, when President Carter asked Secretary Vance if the embassy could be protected, the Secretary told me Friday, we said we could, but we didn't.
Each day the hostages were held captive, CBS Evening News anchor Walter Cronkite kept a tally. They were released just after President Ronald Reagan was sworn in on January 20th, 1981, after 444 days. Coming up, we'll fast forward 17 years, how Iran responded to concerns it was pursuing a nuclear weapon. You're watching 50 years of 60 Minutes Iran coverage. In 1997, Mike Wallace traveled yet again to Iran. President Bill Clinton had imposed a trade embargo on the country, and House Speaker Newt Gingrich called Iran, quote, the most dangerous nation on earth. The biggest concern was Iran trying to build a nuclear weapon.
We Americans remember how Iran humiliated us by capturing our embassy and holding 52 of our countrymen hostage for 444 days. And Iranians remember how America supported the Shah, whom they hated and eventually overthrew. Even though that was 18 years ago, the Speaker of Iran's parliament still calls America a blood-sucking wolf, and House Speaker Newt Gingrich calls Iran the most dangerous nation on earth. Iran's president, Hashemi Rafsanjani, told me he'd like to tone down that rhetoric. Rafsanjani rarely gives interviews to Western journalists, but he spoke with us partly because he wants to improve relations between Iran and America. As for President Clinton, he has shown little enthusiasm for talking to Iran. You know what the president says. Iran, the state of Iran, sponsors terrorism because you're killing dissidents. You've killed them in Germany, in France, in Iraq, in Turkey.
These are all claims. Many of them are not true. In some cases, they have been distorted.
Well, shall I leave with you this list of people who have been either killed, assassinated, or seriously injured by your people, your so-called terrorists?
Inside the United States, people who have been against the government, have they never been killed? What about those people in Waco who all burned to death?
What about those 241 American Marines who were killed in Beirut 13 years ago, apparently by Hezbollah? Iran created Hezbollah and, with Syria, continues to finance and coordinate its activities against Israel. And a Western intelligence report says, in the last year, Iran has sent 30 plane loads of weapons to Hezbollah. The president found that report somehow amusing.
Humanitarian assistance is what those planes that you are talking about provide.
Missiles, humanitarian assistance, rockets.
You think those missiles launched there are not available in Lebanon? These are all Russian weapons, stocked in Lebanon from the old days.
President Rafsanjani is Iran's most popular politician. He came up the hard way. He was imprisoned and tortured under the Shah. Now, at age 62, Rafsanjani is considered a moderate. But so far, hardline religious leaders have blocked his efforts to improve relations with the U.S., and President Clinton hasn't helped. He slapped a U.S. trade embargo on Iran. The White House complains that Iran is doing all it can to scuttle the Mideast peace process.
You get in the way of the peace process that is okayed by King Hussein of Jordan, that is okayed by Mubarak and Egypt, that has been okayed by many, many Palestinians. You are more Palestinian, sir, than the Palestinians.
We have said we do not consider this peace a fair peace. And this peace process will not succeed because it has not addressed the issue of refugees.
Who knows more about the right of the Palestinian, Hashemi Rafsanjani or Yasser Arafat?
We are not alone. Many Palestinians speak like us. They also take action. We do not take any action.
But the U.S. says Iranian money may have helped pay for these bombings of Israeli buses and markets that killed 61 civilians last year. Iran denies it. Rafsanjani condemns America's support of Israel in what he calls America's heavy-handed foreign policy, and most Iranians agree with him. We spoke with hikers up in the Elburz Mountains outside Tehran, where residents of the capital like to go on their day off.
You know, what we feel about you, about the United States, that you want to control every country, every policy, every movement, everything.
You really believe that?
We really believe in that.
For instance?
For example, about Iraq. If Iraq wants to capture Kuwait, it's none of America's business.
And she thought it was none of our business how Iranian women dress. But still, she explained the dress code which requires women to cover all but their faces with dark, loose-fitting clothes.
Do you resent the fact that you have to wear
No, I believe in it.
You do? Why?
Yeah, I do. I believe that all a woman's beauties are to be limited in for one's family.
But off camera, several women told us that most of them do resent having to wear those clothes, but they were afraid to complain about anything on camera.
We shouldn't talk anything about politics. We should know. But
this is a free country.
I mean, it's a free country. Okay. It's a free country for you.
Iran is a tricky story for a television reporter because what you see may be less important than what you cannot see. Beyond the dress code, single people are not allowed to date. No one is allowed to drink alcohol. But behind closed doors and drawn curtains, many unmarried Iranians still have parties, even though they risk a fine and a night in jail if they get caught.
How do you reconcile the public and private lives of your women? In private, you know this. Many of them wear revealing clothes. Many of them, of a certain class, drink whiskey, alcohol, and they mingle with men freely. And you know it's true. Doesn't the Islamic Republic force some of its women, anyway, to be hypocritical in the lives they live?
There are some people who do not believe in our laws. We can tell them to observe the dress code in the street. This is required by law. But in their homes, we can have no influence on them. They do what they want. We know there are many people like this.
The sexes are kept so separate that men get on the front of the bus, women get on in back. Still, life for women is getting better. Women have more chances in both education and employment. These students at the Foreign Language Institute hope to become interpreters.
You find this young man attractive, or one standing over there. Would there be a problem going to the movies together?
Well, just talking is okay, no problem, but nothing more.
But in Iran, as in America, people care most about the economy. The capital, Tehran, looks better than ever. It's clean and prosperous, with new buildings sprouting up all over. America's trade embargo has had little effect because America's allies, France and Germany, are gobbling up contracts that would have gone to U.S. companies. So oil money keeps pouring in. Under the watchful gaze of the late Ayatollah Khomeini, who led the revolution against the Shah, the government has built highways,
and hospitals and schools in rural villages that never had them before. But in the cities, prices, especially food prices, are so high and wages so low that people often have to work at 2 or even 3 jobs just to make ends meet. In fact, many young people don't have enough money to get married, so more Iranians are resorting to what are called temporary marriages. They get a signed certificate from their local religious leader that declares them married for as little as 1 day, 1 week, 1 month.
There are many people who need to satisfy their instincts on a temporary basis.
For 1 day, or 1 week, or 1 month?
Whatever the length of time.
It sounds like legitimizing illicit sexual relations.
No, there is an order to it. Psychologically, this is a legal act, not a forbidden act that everyone is afraid of.
But there is still plenty of fear in Iran. Students told us if they criticized the government, they'd be thrown out of the university.
We don't like to talk about politics at all.
Really? Why?
That's right. Well, because it's dangerous. Why to talk about politics?
It's dangerous?
Sure.
We saw what she meant when we were confronted by some fundamentalist students who demanded to know what we'd been up to.
I'd like to know about your question that you asked our students here.
Sir, it is none of your business.
They objected to our having talked about author Salman Rushdie, who is still targeted for assassination by Iran because of a book he wrote 9 years ago that they feel slandered Islam.
If I face with Salman Rushdie myself, I murder him because he doesn't respect Islamic religion.
Because he's not a human being at least. Because he was a person who destroyed our culture.
It seems to me that your culture has survived Salman Rushdie.
Now the hardliners believe their culture is under aerial attack. Government murals warn people not to be seduced by evil influences from private satellite dishes.
The government here banned private satellite dishes about a year ago because they were becoming alarmed at the huge enthusiasm young Iranians were showing for Western television, movies, fashion, the lifestyles that they could see on their television sets. So now Iranians are hiding their illegal satellite dishes outside, behind the bushes, or inside near a window. But the truth is, it will be simply impossible for the government to ban Western influences because they are literally falling from the sky. Do you know what Baywatch is?
No, I haven't seen it.
Young women, very small bathing suits, and there are people who have satellite dishes in Iran who charge their neighbors to go to their place because they still have a satellite dish to watch Baywatch.
It might be so, but you must admit that these kinds of programs cause problems for young people. They weaken the foundation of a family, and they have created problems in the West. And the statistics of women without husbands and children without fathers in the West are terrible.
Are you suggesting that perhaps we should have an Islamic Republic of the United States?
No, I am saying that you should have good ethics. Do not allow perversion in the ethics of your young people.
And Iran is awash in young people. More than half the population now is under 20 years of age. And President Rafsanjani fears they are the most susceptible to the lure of American television.
Things like the Playboy channel or Hollywood films do not help the progress of your country and your people.
How are you familiar with Playboy programs? Do you have a satellite dish, Mr. President?
No, we hear these things. We read these things in reports.
Many Iranians told us they admire America. At least 1/3 of President Rafsanjani's cabinet members were educated in the United States. But Rafsanjani says he cannot convince his colleagues to engage in talks with America unless the U.S. releases frozen Iranian assets. Billions of dollars Iran sent to America to buy weapons. The weapons sales stopped when the Shah was deposed, but the money remained in the U.S.
Let's you and I play a game.
We are not here to play game.
I'm the United States, you're Iran. I give you the money. What do you do for me?
Then we'll be ready to talk to one another.
You serious?
This would be a sign of goodwill. You may choose something else as evidence of goodwill.
But for now, instead of talking to each other, Iran and America keep talking past each other. For example, U.S. officials say their biggest concern is Iran's program to build a nuclear bomb. Iran insists it only wants nuclear energy, not the bomb.
What the Americans did in Hiroshima and Nagasaki has had everybody hate the idea of getting the bomb.
You are not going after a nuclear bomb.
Definitely not.
You swear on Allah.
Swearing is not needed. Those who swear are the ones who want to lie. We are not going after the nuclear bomb, or biological weapons, or chemical weapons.
Absolutely not.
Absolutely not.
10 years later, Iran's nuclear ambitions were still a major concern for the United States. So in 2007, 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley traveled to Tehran to sit down with President Mahmoud Ahmadinejad.
The president of Iran, Mahmoud Ahmadinejad, knows how to infuriate the Western world, and he did it again last week when he asked to visit Ground Zero. Ahmadinejad plans to be in New York this week for the UN General Assembly meeting. The man who questions the truth behind the Holocaust is expected to demand once again the elimination of Israel. We spoke with Ahmadinejad on Thursday in the garden outside his office in Tehran. We started with that angry reaction to his plan to visit the World Trade Center site. Sir, what were you thinking? The World Trade Center site is the most sensitive place in the American heart. And you must have known that visiting there would be insulting to many, many Americans.
Why should it be insulting?
Well, sir, you're the head of government of an Islamist state that the United States government says is a major exporter of terrorism around the world.
We obviously are very much against any terrorist action and any killing. And also we are very much against any plots to sow the seeds of discord among nations. Usually you go to these sites to pay your respects and also to perhaps air your views about the root causes of such incidents.
Ahmadinejad told us the U.S. and Iran could be friends, but we wanted to know about the growing evidence that Iranian weapons and bomb components are being used against U.S. forces in Iraq. It is an established fact now that Iranian bombs and Iranian know-how are killing Americans in Iraq. You have American blood on your hands. Why?
Well, this is what the American officials are saying. Again, American officials, wherever around the world they encounter a problem which they fail to resolve, instead of accepting that, they prefer to accuse others. I'm very sorry that because of the wrong decisions taken by American officials, Iraqi people are being killed and also American soldiers. It's very regrettable.
The American Army has captured Iranian missiles in Iraq. The critical elements of the explosively formed penetrator bombs that are killing so many people are coming from Iran. There's no doubt about that anymore. The denials are no longer credible, sir.
If I may, are you an American politician? Am I to look at you as an American politician or a reporter? This is what the American officials are claiming. If they accuse us 1,000 times, the truth will not change.
Are you saying that it is not the policy of this government to send weapons into Iraq? Sir, forgive me, you're smiling, but this is a very serious matter to America.
It's serious for us as well. I dare say it's serious for everyone. It seems to me it's laughable for someone to turn a blind eye to the truth and accuse others. It doesn't help And the reason that I'm smiling again, it's because that the picture is so clear, but American officials refuse to see it.
Mr. President, can you tell me that you are not sending weapons to Iraq? Very simple, very directly.
We don't need to do that. We are very much opposed to war and insecurity.
Is that no,
inside
sir?
Iraq. It's very clear, the situation. The insecurity in Iraq is detrimental to our interests.
President Ahmadinejad is 50 with a wife and 3 grown kids. He's the son of a blacksmith, said to be very religious and incorruptible. He was elected 2 years ago largely by rural and poor voters. Back in the 1980s, during Iraq's ruinous invasion of Iran, he was reportedly an elite army intelligence officer in the war with Saddam Hussein. Mr. President, you must have rejoiced more than anyone when Saddam Hussein fell. You owe President Bush. This is one of the best things that's ever happened to your country.
Once the dictator was toppled, many people were happy, but the American government did not appropriately use this golden opportunity. They should have left the Iraqi people to their own, to go their own way and to determine their own fate.
But the issue that threatens war between Iran and the United States is Iran's determination to keep enriching uranium, even though the United Nations Security Council demands that it stop. Ahmadinejad claims Iran only wants nuclear energy, but the Bush administration says he's pursuing a bomb. The International Atomic Energy Agency, the IAEA, is trying to resolve the dispute. You have said in the past that you have 3,000 centrifuges in a line producing highly enriched uranium. Do you have more now?
No, our plan and program is very transparent. We are under the supervision of the agency. Everything is on the table. We have nothing to hide.
Transparent, sir. It's been hidden for more than 15 years. You've been operating a secret nuclear program. It's nothing if it's not secret.
Who is saying that?
Well, the IAEA. You've, in fact, agreed with the IAEA to confess what you've done in secret over the past years. It is not transparent, sir.
The agency is supposed to supervise and ask questions, and we respond. Our activities are very peaceful.
For the sake of clarity, because there is so much concern in the world about this next question, please give me the most direct answer you can. Is it your goal to build a nuclear bomb?
What are you driving at?
Simply that, sir. Is it the goal of your government, the goal of this nation, to build a nuclear weapon?
Do you think that the nuclear technology is only limited in a bomb? You can only build a bomb with that?
I appreciate the differences, sir, but the question is limited to the bomb.
Well, you have to appreciate, we don't need a nuclear bomb. We don't need that. What need do we have for a bomb?
May I take that as a no, sir?
It is a firm no. I'm going to be much firmer now. In political relations right now, the nuclear bomb is of no use. If it was useful, it would have prevented the downfall of the Soviet Union. If it was useful, it would have resolved the problems the Americans have in Iraq. The time of the bomb is past.
At the moment, our two countries may very well be walking down the road to war. How do you convince President Bush? How do you convince other nations in the West?
What two parties are walking towards war?
Iran, the United States, Western countries?
Well, it's wrong to think that Iran and the US are walking towards war. Who says so? Why should we go to war? There is no war in the offing again. This is psychological warfare. If you have differences of opinion, you can use logic to resolve your differences.
What trait do you admire in President Bush? What do you admire
he should
about
respect
him?
the
Is there anything?
American people.
Any trait?
As an American citizen, tell me, what trait do you admire?
Well, Mr. Bush is without question a very religious man, for example, as you are.
What religion, please tell me, tells you as a follower of that religion to occupy another country and kill its people? Please tell me, does Christianity tell its followers to do that?
I take it you can't think of anything you like about President Bush.
Well, I'm not familiar with the gentleman's private life. Maybe in his private life he is very kind or a determined man.
I asked President Bush what he would say to you if he were sitting in this chair. And he told me, quote, "Speaking to you, you've made terrible choices for your people. You've isolated your nation. You've taken a nation of proud and honorable people and made your country the pariah of the world." These are President Bush's words to you. What's your reply to the president?
Well, President Bush is free to think as he pleases and to say what he pleases. I don't think that President Bush has said these things. Rather, I prefer to think that this is your impression of what the president has said.
I'm quoting the president directly for the record.
This is a direct quote. So, well, this tells me that there's a great divide between us.
President Bush has pledged that you will not be allowed to possess a nuclear weapon and will use military force if necessary.
I think Mr. Bush, if he wants his party to win the next elections, there are cheaper ways and ways to go about this. I can very well give him a few ideas so that the people vote for him. He should respect the American people. They should not bug the telephone conversations of their citizens. They should not kill the sons and daughters of the American nation. They should not squander the taxpayers' money and give them to weapons companies, and also help the people, the victims of Katrina. People will vote for them if they do these things. What I'm saying, I am being very sincere here. I'm a Muslim. I cannot tell lies.
But when I ask you a question as direct as, will you pledge not to test a nuclear weapon, you dance all around the question. You never say yes, you never say no.
Well, thank you for that. You are like a CIA investigator. And
I am just a reporter. I am a simple, average American reporter.
This is not Guantanamo Bay. This is not a Baghdad prison. This is not a secret prison in Europe. This is not Abu Ghraib. This is Iran. I'm the president of this country.
Ahead, inside the landmark effort at diplomacy with Iran. You're watching 50 years of 60 Minutes Iran coverage. In 2015, there was new hope diplomacy would finally calm decades of simmering tensions. 60 Minutes' Steve Croft interviewed Iran's president, Hassan Rouhani, about a landmark agreement.
Few issues have inspired more vitriol this summer than the historic agreement between Iran and 6 world powers: the United States, Russia, China, Britain, France, and Germany. The deal drastically curtails Iran's nuclear program in exchange for the lifting of economic sanctions. Depending on where you stand politically, it's either a triumph of global diplomacy, the best available solution, or a blunder of epic proportions. Over the past few months, nearly everyone has weighed in, from President Obama and the Congress to Republican and Democratic presidential candidates to Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. But not much has been heard from the Iranians. With that in mind, we traveled to Tehran last week to sit down with Iranian President Hassan Rouhani for the first interview he has given to a Western news organization in nearly a year. What do you think of the agreement?
A very difficult agreement to reach, with lots of ups and downs. But it's the right path we have chosen. I am happy that we have taken extremely important steps on this issue and are in the process of taking the final steps.
Were you surprised by the ferocity of the debate in the United States and the outcome?
It was predictable. An issue of this significance cannot be resolved without its opponents. One is surprised by the commentaries, and the commentaries are not very pleasant. Some groups and political parties may be against it, but the governments of the world altogether welcomed this deal.
Opponents have argued that the U.S. has given away too much for very little in return from Iran, agreeing to lift the sanctions on Iran in exchange for what they call a temporary 15-year freeze on nuclear operations, after which Iran would be free to resume or begin work on a nuclear bomb with far more resources than they have now.
If a country wanted, with the technical resources it has, to gain an atomic bomb, this deal would have been a very bad deal for it. Because the deal creates limitations from all sides to getting an atomic bomb. But if a country has been after peaceful technology from the beginning, then it has lost nothing. We wanted this incorrect accusation that Iran is after nuclear weapons corrected and resolved, and that the goal of Iran is peaceful activity. In this deal, we have accepted limitations for a period of time in order to create more trust with the world.
The whole deal requires a leap of faith between two longtime enemies. The Iranians have always insisted that their nuclear program is peaceful and that a religious fatwa prohibits them from building nuclear weapons. But there is little doubt that the Iranians know how to build them and have had the wherewithal to do it. Now, they'll be required to ship 98% of their enriched uranium out of the country, lock up thousands of centrifuges, close its bomb-proof enrichment facility at Fordow, disable its heavy water reactor at Iraq, and submit to rigorous international inspections. The opposition here has also been ferocious. The deal has been attacked on state television and in hardline newspapers, and the head of the Revolutionary Guard has said, "We will never accept it." The United States seems to have its hardliners, and Iran seems to have its hardliners. The opponents say essentially that they think Iran has given up too much control over their nuclear program to the U.S. and other foreign countries and to the IAEA. Do you see similarities between the United States and Iran in terms of the opposition to this?
There are similarities. It's natural that opponents always look for the maximum possible outcome. In an agreement, neither achieves the maximum. Both sides must always concede a little bit from the maximum to get an agreement. Therefore, the person who seeks the maximum complains. The result of this agreement benefits everyone, benefits both sides because we've been able to reach an understanding, an agreement on a very complicated issue at the negotiating table and be able to prevent misunderstandings and take the first step towards trust. Of course, for reaching trust between the U.S. and Iran, there is need for a lot of time.
Some of the opponents are very powerful. The commander of the Revolutionary Guard, for example, has condemned the deal. How do you deal with that? That's an important political force in this country.
It's clear that some will be opposed, some will be in favor, will express their opinions, but at the same time, after the agreement is approved by the responsible institutions, everyone will comply with that. The Revolutionary Guards, also when the deal is approved by responsible institutions, they too will respect this agreement.
President Rouhani's boss, Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, has final say on the agreement and is sent it to the Iranian Parliament and the Supreme National Security Council for a vigorous debate. Publicly, the Ayatollah has maintained a hardline stance against the United States while supporting the negotiations. President Rouhani expressed confidence that the deal will be approved.
The majority of our people in opinion polls have a positive view of the agreement, and usually, institutions like the Parliament and the Supreme National Security Council are usually not far removed from public opinion and move in that direction.
You have been very temperate in your statements about these negotiations You have been trying to encourage a sense of goodwill between the United States and Iran. But some of this and some of the success has been undercut by very harsh statements from both sides. Since the deal, the Ayatollah Khamenei has endorsed, even praised, the chanting of death to America and death to Israel at the Friday prayers by demonstrators. And he continues to call the United States the Great Satan. Do you believe the United States is the Great Satan?
The enmity that existed between the United States and Iran over the decades, the distance, the disagreements, the lack of trust, will not go away soon. What's important is which direction we are heading. Are we heading towards amplifying the enmity or decreasing this enmity? I believe we have taken the first steps towards decreasing this enmity.
Do you think the United States is the Great Satan?
Satan, in our religious parlance, is used to refer to that power that tricks others and whose words are not clear words, do not match reality. What I can say is that the U.S. has made many mistakes in the past regarding Iran and must make up for those mistakes.
I'm sure you realize that it is difficult for many Americans to get past the fact that President Obama has signed an agreement with the country that says death to America, death to Israel. How do you explain this? What are they to make of it? Are they to take it literally? Is this for domestic, internal Iranian political consumption? What are Americans to make of it? The language.
This slogan that is chanted is not a slogan against the American people. Our people respect the American people. The Iranian people are not looking for war with any country. But at the same time, the policies of the United States have been against the national interests of Iranian people. It's understandable that people will demonstrate sensitivity to this issue. When the people rose up against the Shah, the United States aggressively supported the Shah until the last moments. In the 8-year war with Iraq, the Americans supported Saddam. People will not forget these things. We cannot forget the past, but at the same time, our gaze must be towards the future.
Death to America is a very simple concept. 3 words. Not much room left for interpretation. Not very conciliatory. Do you see the day when that language will not be used? You yourself have encouraged both sides to try and lower the temperature.
If America puts the enmity aside, if it initiates goodwill, and if it compensates for the past, the future situation between the United States and Iran will change.
The United States has just signed an agreement with Iran to lift the sanctions. Isn't that not a sign of goodwill?
It hasn't been implemented yet. The lifting of the sanctions must be initiated.
Full implementation of the agreement is still months away and requires that the International Atomic Energy Agency certify that Iran has lived up to its commitments under the deal. Do you think the level of trust between Iran and the United States has improved because of this treaty?
Relative to the past, it's improved, but this does not mean that all disagreements are resolved or all the distrust removed. In one case, on one issue, yes, we have managed to overcome the problem.
There's been speculation and hope inside and outside of Iran and in the United States that this nuclear deal could be a catalyst for some broader, if limited, cooperation between the two countries where there are mutual interests.
Many areas exist where in those areas it's possible that common goals or common interests may exist. But what is important is that in the nuclear agreement we see how the two sides behave in action. Enacting this deal in a good way will create a new environment.
Ayatollah Khamenei has said that there will be no further cooperation beyond the nuclear agreement. But there is already some indirect military coordination between U.S. airstrikes and Iranian-backed Shiite militias, both fighting against ISIS in Iraq. Officially, it's being done through the Iraqi military. There is also the possibility of future cooperation in Syria.
You have said that you're willing to sit down with any country, friend or enemy, to discuss the situation in Syria in order to stop the bloodshed. What does Iran see as a possible, workable, acceptable solution to the situation in Syria?
Look, in a country where a large segment of the country has been occupied by terrorists, there is bloodshed inside the country. Millions of people have been displaced. How is it possible that we fight the terrorists of this country without supporting and helping the government of that country? How can we fight the terrorists without the government staying? Of course, after we have fought terrorism and a secure environment is created, then it is time to talk about the Constitution or the future regime, to talk and discuss. Opposition groups and supporters sit at a table, but during a situation of bloodshed and during an occupation of the country, what options exist?
So far, President Rouhani has been the biggest political beneficiary of the agreement between Iran and the United States. He is popular with the voters right now, but he's also ruffled some feathers and no doubt irritated political rivals.
This agreement was a big political victory for you personally. You were elected president based on the idea that you wanted to open up Iran to the outside world, that you wanted to get the sanction lifted, that you wanted to bring prosperity back to the country, so Iran could take its place among the great nations in the world and not be isolated. There are still some things in that agenda that are still unfulfilled. Freedom of speech, more access to the internet and personal freedoms.
I think relative to the 2 years I've been in office, I've been successful. Not 100%, of course, but successful. Our relations with other countries have improved. There is more freedom at the universities, lively debates, and greater freedom of the press compared to the past. Of course, there are some issues that are not in control of the government.
Two of those issues, human rights and personal freedoms, are in the domain of Iran's conservative judicial system. Two former presidential candidates have been under house arrest for the past 4.5 years, and there are at least 3 Americans imprisoned here.
As we sit here and speak, there right now there is a dual American-Iranian citizen, a journalist for the Washington Post, Jason Rezaian, in prison for more than a year on unspecified charges. There has been talk among leaders in the last few weeks that there might be a prisoner exchange. Is there anything you can say to clarify the situation?
We have Iranians who are imprisoned in the United States, Iranians who are being pursued, and most of them are being pursued for circumventing the sanctions. And you know that from the beginning we considered the sanctions to be wrong, and we encouraged everyone to circumvent them. We consider all of those prisoners to be innocent, and consider it wrong that they are in prison.
Would you support a prisoner exchange?
I don't particularly like the word exchange. But from a humanitarian perspective, if we can take a step, we must do it. The American side must take its own steps.
If the nuclear deal stays on track and the sanctions are lifted, the Iranian treasury will soon begin collecting $100 billion in oil revenues that have been frozen in overseas banks. And President Rouhani says Iran will be open for business.
As you know, in Iran we are transferring the economy step by step to the private, non-governmental sector. Our private sector and the American private sector can improve the environment. Actually, it will strengthen the nuclear agreement, even tourism. If the people of the United States come to Iran and see its ancient history and nature of Iran, and the people of Iran go to the United States to see America, this can shorten the walls of mistrust and improve the situation for the future.
President Trump withdrew the United States from the Iranian nuclear deal in 2018. Coming up, how an American drone strike escalated tensions. The first time the U.S. assassinated an Iranian military leader was January 3rd, 2020. A year later, our David Martin got the inside story on how the U.S. avoided a disaster when Iran decided to retaliate.
The U.S. airstrike against Iranian-backed militias Thursday night was the latest chapter in the poisonous relationship with Iran President Biden inherited from the Trump administration. 13 months ago, the two countries came perilously close to war. It began with an American drone strike which killed Iran's most powerful general and ended with an Iranian ballistic missile attack against U.S. troops in Iraq. It was the largest ballistic missile attack ever against Americans. Tonight, we will show you for the first time drone video of the attack and talk to the troops who were there the night the U.S. and Iran went to the brink.
Hey, buddy. If you're seeing this video, some bad things happened to Dad last night. So I need you to be strong, okay? For Mom. And just always know in your heart that I love you, okay? Bye, buddy.
A few hours after Army Major Alan Johnson recorded that message to his son, Iranian ballistic missiles began raining down on Al-Assad Air Base in Iraq, where 2,000 U.S. troops were based. As a drone recorded the attack, Americans caught in the crosshairs could do nothing but run or duck and cover.
Holy God damn!
Each missile carried a warhead weighing more than 1,000 pounds.
Stay right here, bro. Don't move.
Well, words can't even describe the amount of energy that is released by these missiles.
Johnson was taking cover in a bunker designed to protect troops against much smaller warheads, weighing only 60 pounds.
Knocked the wind out of me, followed by the most putrid-tasting ammonia tasting dust that swept through the bunker, coated your teeth.
After the blast wave and debris came the flames.
The fire was just rolling over the bunker, like 70 feet in the air.
Johnson's bunker provided no protection from that.
We're going to burn to death. We start heading down 135 meters, make it about a third of the way there. The big voice, we call it, clicks in, incoming, incoming, take cover, take cover, take cover. I've got another football field to run. I don't know when this next missile is going to hit.
Can you hear the incoming?
Like a freight train going by you.
Johnson wasn't the only one frantically searching for cover.
It's 6 people running for their lives to get to this next bunker. We get to the bunker and realize there's roughly 40 people trying to stuff themselves into this bunker that's made for about 10 folks. And I grabbed the guy in front of me. I'm just like, you got to get in the bunker, and just like shoved everybody in there.
But when you're running between bunkers, it's just a matter of what, luck?
Luck. The only thing I can actually come up with is that the hand of God protected us, because really nobody should have lived through this.
Things are happening that could take us to war if we don't make the correct move here.
Marine General Frank McKenzie, commander of U.S. forces in the Middle East, monitored the attack from his headquarters at Tampa, Florida. Ducking into this small room off his main operations center, where he could talk directly to the only 2 people above him in the chain of command.
They bring in the Secretary of Defense, and then a little bit later they brought in the President to this conversation. We're listening to the reports of the missiles flying.
You ever been on one like this?
I've never been on one like this, where real missiles being fired at our forces, and where I thought the risks were so high.
The Iranian attack on al-Assad was in retaliation for a stunning U.S. operation President Trump ordered 6 nights earlier. A drone strike which killed Iran's most powerful general, Qasem Soleimani.
The blood of many Americans is on the hands of Qasem Soleimani. He was as close to an indispensable man as you could find inside Iran. Where he went, violence and death followed.
During the American occupation of Iraq, Soleimani had orchestrated attacks which killed more than 600 U.S. troops. And according to McKenzie, he was planning to do it again.
We saw intelligence reports where Qasem Soleimani was moving various attack streams forward against our forces in Iraq, against our embassy and against other bases there.
Were they imminent?
Perhaps in hours, perhaps in days, probably not weeks.
Until then, the U.S. had shied away from going after Soleimani for fear killing such a high-ranking government official would only provoke more Iranian attacks.
I never take killing anyone as an easy decision, but I think the risk of not acting in this case outweighed the risks of acting. So yes, I was good with the decision.
On January 3rd of last year, an airport security camera recorded Soleimani's arrival in Baghdad on a commercial flight from Damascus. McKenzie was watching from a different angle.
You have the drones overhead. Do you see him get off the airplane?
Yes, yes.
As Soleimani's entourage pulled away from the plane, Mackenzie gave the kill order to the commander controlling the drones.
And then I said, take your shot when you got it.
Missiles slammed into both vehicles simultaneously.
There's no backslapping, there's no cheering, because now I have to prepare to deal with the consequences of the action.
General Mackenzie was sure Iran would retaliate, but he didn't know how. And neither, for a while, did the Iranians.
I believe they went into a period of disorganization because they had lost the officer who really spoke up and shaped everything up and told them what they were going to do.
So it was kind of an ominous silence.
It was a very ominous silence.
And what was the first sign that Iran might really be thinking of a ballistic missile attack?
They began to move their ballistic missiles.
The attack was just hours away when Major Alan Johnson got the word Iran's most powerful weapons were aiming for al-Assad.
My intelligence officer pulled me aside and basically said, "Sir, I've got some bad news for you." "What's up?" "We have information that Iran is fueling 27 medium-range ballistic missiles, and their intention is to level this base. And we may not survive."
This was a completely different threat.
Lieutenant Colonel Tim Garland commanded an Army battalion at al-Assad, a sprawling airbase about 120 miles west of Baghdad, where the U.S. operated scores of helicopters, drones, and other aircraft.
Did the base have any defense against ballistic missiles?
No, sir. It was such an unprecedented threat. I don't think it was ever calculated. So the capability to prevent a ballistic missile attack, it wasn't there.
Did you have a plan for what to do?
We came up with a plan.
The only real defense against a ballistic missile attack is to get out of harm's way.
Air Force Lieutenant Colonel Stacy Coleman and the rest of al-Assad scrambled to evacuate more than 50 aircraft and 1,000 troops before the missiles hit. But the base still had to be manned.
We still needed to be able to do our mission. So the first decision was to split our team by combat capability.
What did you think was going to happen to the people you were telling to stay?
The honest truth is, I didn't think that we were going to survive.
The best shelter was air raid bunkers built during the rule of Saddam Hussein, but there weren't enough of them.
And I just remember a very heavy sinking feeling setting in. It was like, man, we are not going to come up with a bunker plan that's going to be adequate for the number of people that we're talking about.
So Garland sent most of his soldiers out into the desert, where they watched the attack from a safe distance.
Holy! There was a lot of people who didn't want to leave. They didn't want to be that guy that was going to relative safety.
A lot of people might have trouble understanding what you just said. Tell me why a soldier wouldn't want to go to a safe place.
They want to carry the burden. They want to share in the danger.
From his headquarters in Tampa, General Frank McKenzie had tried to time the evacuation just right.
If you go too early, you risk the problem that the enemy will see what you have done and adjust his plans.
The Iranians monitored al-Assad by purchasing photos like these taken by commercial satellites. McKenzie waited until after Iran had downloaded its last picture for the day.
So the last time the Iranians took a look with their commercially acquired spy photos, what would they have seen?
They would have seen airplanes on the ground and people working.
So when they launched those missiles, they thought that was going to be a full flight line.
I think they expected to destroy a number of U.S. aircraft and to kill a number of U.S. service members.
A clock stopped at 1:34 a.m. when it was knocked off the wall, recorded the moment the first missile landed.
It's like the sun rising instantaneous. That's how bright it was.
Air Force Master Sergeant John Haynes and his security team were outside their armored patrol vehicle when the first missile struck.
Across the radio, we heard incoming, incoming, incoming.
And what do you do?
I just threw the phone down and ran to my vehicle. And then once that impact happened, the back pressure blew our doors closed, and then you just see a cloud of dirt, fire.
They call it a shock wave, and you kind of feel that wave almost internally. Like it's almost as if your organs are, kind of wavering around inside.
Sergeant Kimo Keltz was outside the bunkers manning a guard post in case the missile barrage was followed by a ground assault.
We got down and we protected our vital organs, our heads, and we waited.
Did it blow you around?
And one of the closest ones that had hit directly near us had actually lifted my body about 2 inches off the ground.
Iran fired a total of 16 missiles from 3 locations. 5 missed, 11 landed at Al-Assad. This was an attack like no other.
It was an attack certainly like nothing I've ever seen or experienced.
What have you learned so far?
Their missiles are accurate.
Did that surprise you?
We knew it, but to see it, they fired those missiles to significant range, and they hit pretty much where they wanted to hit.
From first launch to last impact was 80 minutes. Somehow, no one was killed. When the sun came up, the survivors surveyed the damage.
Holy shells of a building, skeletal frames left with nothing else. Craters about a room size deep into the ground. Concrete barriers blown across a field or a street.
It looked like a scene from a movie where everything is destroyed around you, but yet no one was killed.
I still have no idea or understanding other than, God being on our side, that no one was seriously injured and there were no fatalities.
The news traveled fast up the chain of command, and President Trump tweeted, "All is well." That turned out to be premature.
There are people throwing up. Everybody had headaches.
I had a concussion for 2 weeks.
What did it feel like?
Someone hitting me over the head with a hammer over and over and over.
Finally, hours later, we realized we have a mass casualty event here of traumatic brain injury.
Military doctors diagnosed more than 100 cases of traumatic brain injury. Major Alan Johnson and 28 other soldiers received Purple Hearts. Do you have any lingering effects today?
Headaches every day, horrible tinnitus or ringing in the ears, PTSD. I'll be willing to admit that. I still have nightmares.
But the nightmare of war with Iran had been averted.
Had Americans been killed, it would have been very different.
Have you ever done an estimate on if you hadn't evacuated, the damage that would have been done?
So I think we might have lost 20 or 30 airplanes, and we might have lost 100 to 150 U.S. personnel.
You had a plan to retaliate if they killed Americans.
David, we had a plan to retaliate if Americans had died.
Iran was on alert for a possible U.S. strike and hours later mistakenly shot down a Ukrainian airliner thinking it was an American bomber. 176 entirely innocent people died.
In the fall of 2022, Leslie Stahl spoke with Iran's President Ibrahim Raisi. It was his first sit-down interview with a Western reporter. Only a year into his presidency, Raisi discussed the requirements needed for a nuclear deal with the U.S.
The United States first placed financial sanctions on Iran back in 1979 during the hostage crisis. For nearly 4 decades, the U.S. State Department has designated Iran one of the world's leading state sponsors of terrorism. But the Obama administration, along with 5 other countries, agreed to billions of dollars in sanctions relief in exchange for Iran's agreement to dismantle much of its nuclear program and open its facilities to extensive international inspection. The Trump administration, distrusting Tehran, pulled out of the deal and stepped up crushing economic pressure. That's where Ibrahim Raisi found himself when he was elected president a year ago. Last month, Iran and the 61-year-old hardliner were on the verge of striking a new deal, but then Iran submitted demands that sent the nuclear talks into a stalemate.
Sir, thank you. I'm Leslie.
We met President Raisi Tuesday at the presidential compound in Tehran for his first interview with a Western reporter. I was told how to dress, not to sit before he did, and not to interrupt him. We were given 1 hour for the interview.
can we start with the negotiations on the nuclear deal? Do you want to have that deal renewed? Because, you know, there are some American officials who are beginning to think that you don't.
If it's a good deal and fair deal, we would be serious about reaching an agreement. It needs to be lasting. There needs to be guarantees. If there were a guarantee, then the Americans could not withdraw from the deal.
But you can pull out of the deal. I mean, just as well as we could pull out of the deal.
You see, the Americans broke their promises. They did it unilaterally. They said that, I am out of the deal. Now making promises is becoming meaningless.
Are you saying that you cannot trust the Americans?
We cannot trust the Americans because of the behavior that we've already seen from them. That is why if there is no guarantee, there is no trust.
The U.S. says the West can't trust Iran, for instance, when it claims its nuclear program is purely for peaceful purposes.
As far as we can tell, you don't use it for, you know, things that can help your citizens like electricity. You say that you want it for peaceful reasons. Like what?
Like in medicine, agriculture, oil, gas.
In terms of peaceful purposes, one available figure from the UN nuclear watchdog agency, the IAEA, is that only 1.8% of the country's electricity is generated by nuclear power.
There seems to be some evidence that you had been working at least before toward a weapon, and that you might be doing that again.
We have responded to these claims several times. They are baseless. The Islamic Republic of Iran has said many times that possessing nuclear weapons has no place in our doctrine.
However, the U.S. intelligence community has assessed with high confidence that Iran did attempt to develop a nuclear bomb in the past. And then there are the American citizens being detained in Tehran, 3 of whom were born in Iran.
If there is a deal, would you agree to release the 4 Americans who are being held here? Could that be part of it?
There are Iranian nationals also imprisoned inside the U.S. These people are only in there because they simply tried to circumvent sanctions. And the Americans, we have told them that we can talk to them about this. It can be conducted separately from the nuclear talks. It can be done between the 2 countries. It is a humanitarian issue. This can be negotiated.
You're off to New York. You're going to speak at the United Nations. You know, President Biden is going to be there. Are you open to a meeting with President Biden, a face-to-face?
No, I don't think that such a meeting would happen. I don't believe having a meeting or talk with him will be beneficial.
What do you think the difference is, from your perspective, between the Trump administration and the Biden administration?
The new administration in the U.S., they claim that they are different from the Trump administration. They have said it in their messages to us, but we haven't witnessed any changes in reality.
His major grievance against President Biden is that he has maintained the sanctions on Iran that President Trump imposed.
The sanctions are very tyrannical. This is a tyranny against the people of Iran. It is important to us to have the sanctions lifted.
The sanctions thrust Iran into a 2-year recession, mainly because oil exports from refineries like this one fell overnight from 2.8 million barrels a day to about 200,000. Businesses have been cut off from international banking. With inflation today in Iran at over 40%, virtually everything is more expensive. And yet, we found traffic here as clogged as in New York. And as we saw, Tehran's bazaars are teeming with shoppers.
Hello.
The ones we met were friendly to us.
How are you?
Oh, I'm good. How are you?
Fine, thanks. And you?
Good. Do you study English in school?
No.
One reason for the bustling commerce is something the president calls the resistance economy, in which businesses are encouraged to make more of the things themselves that they used to import. So, do you know where these are made?
Made in Iran.
In Iran?
Yeah.
Homemade blue jeans.
For our country.
Also made in Iran, washing machines, refrigerators, TVs. They also have their own version of Uber Eats called Snap Food. Iran is home to one of the world's oldest civilizations, dating back to 4000 BC. It's where the foundations of algebra and chemistry were developed. Today, while there's attention to religious tradition in the Islamic Republic, it's one of the most westernized countries in the Middle East, with a well-educated population. This mall could be anywhere in America, with an ice skating rink, a food court with hot dogs and burgers, and the least expected, sexy window displays. And yet, President Raisi just signed a decree making women who don't dress modestly subject to arrest. A young woman died Friday after the morality police took her into custody for violating the rules on head coverings. Eyewitnesses say they saw her being beaten while in a police van. President Raisi's office says he ordered an investigation. Syed Ibrahim Raisi descends from the Prophet Muhammad, as his black turban signifies, according to Shiite Muslim tradition. He's a hardline conservative cleric like his mentor, the supreme leader Ayatollah Khamenei.
I want to ask you about your own record. There is a personal sanction against you. You took part in a commission that was responsible for executing up to 5,000 political dissidents. They were hanged or shot by firing squad. I want to ask if you regret that action.
What kind of proof can you offer for this? These are just allegations and claims made by members of a terrorist group.
You're saying that that was not true and that
Anybody who commits a crime in Iran stands trial in official courts of law, and they receive punishments for what they did. They were assassinating people, and what happened to them was exactly proportionate to what they did.
But the U.S. Treasury Department sanctioned Raisi personally for human rights violations over this, and Amnesty International called it a crime against humanity. The president was feisty with us, sprinkling his answers with a predictable antipathy toward Israel and Jewish people. The supreme leader, Ayatollah Khamenei, was scathing when he tweeted on the same subject in English in 2018, "Israel is a malignant, cancerous tumor that has to be removed and eradicated."
Do you believe the Holocaust happened? That 6 million Jews were slaughtered?
Look, historical events should be investigated by researchers and historians. There are some signs that it happened. If so, they should allow it to be investigated and researched.
So you're not sure? I'm getting that. You're not sure. What about Israel's right to exist?
You see, the people of Palestine are the reality. This is the right of the people of Palestine who are forced to leave their houses and motherland. The Americans are supporting this false regime there to take root and be established there.
You know that Morocco, Bahrain, Sudan, and the United Arab Emirates have all recognized Israel and have relations with Israel. And it is said that Saudi Arabia is also talking directly with Israel. And I wonder if you'd want to comment on that.
If a state shakes hands with the Zionist regime, then they are also an accomplice to their crimes, and they are stabbing the very idea of Palestine in the back.
You have vowed revenge on the U.S. government for the killing of General Soleimani.
More than 2 years ago, the U.S. killed General Qasem Soleimani in a drone strike. A revered military hero in Iran, he masterminded deadly attacks on American forces throughout the region for years. The supreme leader has called for retaliation.
Are you intending to retaliate by assassinating officials from the Trump administration?
What the then American government did, by the direct order of Trump himself, to assassinate Mr. Qasem Soleimani, this was a heinous crime. We want justice to be served. We are not going to forget about this.
I'm wondering what you mean by justice. Does it mean an eye for an eye? There was this assassination, now we're going to have an answer assassination.
That's the type of the actions that the Americans and Zionist regimes are doing in the world. We are not going to carry out the same actions.
And yet, the U.S. Department of Justice has charged a member of Iran's Revolutionary Guard with just that, plotting to assassinate John Bolton, President Trump's former national security advisor. As he prepares for his trip to the UN, President Raisi is defiant. His message? No concessions in the nuclear deal. Iran will not back down, and it can survive the sanctions, which he says could well backfire against the United States.
Yes, they can create restrictions and problems for us and difficulties, but there's a number of countries that are being sanctioned. By doing this, they are bringing them closer together, making them more united, and this will render American sanctions ineffective.
Right, Chinese, Russians, Iranians getting closer.
This approach won't work.
As we ended what seemed to be a cordial conversation, we were surprised when a member of Raisi's staff reached up and blocked one of our cameramen from shooting our goodbyes.
No, it's my camera. No.
Another one of our cameramen's phones was confiscated and held by President Raisi's security team for 2.5 hours.
Ahead, inside the assassination attempts on Iranian dissidents. In 2023, Iran began a, quote, shadow war to silence critics of the regime. Two targets of Tehran's attacks spoke with Leslie Stahl.
Tensions keep rising between the U.S. and Iran since the Israel-Hamas war began. Almost every week, Iranian-backed militias have attacked U.S. bases in Syria and Iraq. It's the latest example, and a serious escalation, of Tehran's use of proxy fighters like Hezbollah and Hamas. Tonight, you'll hear of another type of proxy that Iran deploys that receives far less attention. Tehran is hiring hitmen around the world in an effort to intimidate, abduct, and assassinate perceived enemies of the regime. And they're doing it right here on U.S. soil. This video was posted online by a channel affiliated with Iran's Revolutionary Guard. It vows to kill former American government officials, including President Trump, to avenge the 2020 U.S. assassination of the terrorism mastermind Qasem Soleimani. Threats like this have been deemed credible enough that several of these officials have been under round-the-clock protection, including former Defense Secretary Mark Esper, former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo. Iran reportedly offered a hitman $1 million to kill him, and John Bolton, the former national security advisor.
They bargained the price for me would be $300,000, which I have to say I found insulting.
So what exactly was the plot against you?
The Revolutionary Guard sought to procure either my kidnapping or my assassination, not directly by a Revolutionary Guard's member, but by seeking a hitman who would carry out the job either in the U.S. or abroad.
The FBI has an arrest warrant out for this Iranian officer claiming that he hired the hitman online
to travel to Washington, corner Bolton in a garage, and kill him. But it turned out, lucky for Bolton, the assassin was an FBI informant.
This was not internet chatter. This was a negotiation to murder an American citizen, a former government official.
Is the threat against you ongoing?
We've got marked Secret Service cars that say police, United States Secret Service, outside my home.
We talked to the FBI and several intelligence agencies, and they told us that Iran's efforts are becoming more frequent and bolder, and that they often go after vocal Iranian activists living abroad.
The idea behind assassination plot, behind kidnapping plot, is to keep you silent. It's a beautiful family place.
We met one of their targets in Brooklyn. Masih Ahmadinejad is a leader in the women's revolt against the law in Iran mandating they wear a headscarf or hijab. Forced to flee 14 years ago, she settled here in Brooklyn, where she encourages women back home to send her videos of them taking off the hijabs, and she spreads those images online to her 10 million or so followers, fueling the protest movement. So the mullahs began to focus on you. The FBI came and told you there was a plot against you.
There were like 6 or 7 FBI agents. When they came to my house, they told me that your life is in danger. I was like, okay, tell me something new. Because we Iranians are used to it. But they actually said, no, this time is different. They said that the Iranian regime hired private investigator on U.S. soil to take photos of your movement, your daily life, your routine. And I was like, wow, so they're here in New York, in Brooklyn.
The plot was to kidnap you and take you by speedboat to Venezuela?
Hey, it sounds like a scary movie to you now.
No, it sounds implausible to me.
You see, it's a reality for us.
And a reality for the FBI that says the plan was to get her to Iran to stand trial. It was the same for Jamshid Sharmad, another Iranian dissident who lived in Los Angeles for 2 decades and created a website where people in Iran could report human rights abuses. In 2020, while he was changing planes in Dubai on a business trip, his family noticed his phone started heading in the wrong direction. His daughter, Giselle Sharmad, soon saw her dad pop up on Iranian TV in a courtroom looking petrified.
He's forced to confessions about crimes he did not commit. The charge that they gave him is corruption on earth. That's why he got the death sentence.
Is it a situation where he could actually be executed?
Oh, yes.
Any day.
They want to hang him from a crane in the middle of the city.
The original plot to kidnap Masih was thwarted. But according to the FBI, a year later, in 2022, Iran paid this Azerbaijani, living outside New York City, $30,000 to buy a semi-automatic rifle and kill her. He lurked outside her home for a week. His plan was to take advantage of her friendliness to her neighbors.
He was actually following my life. He knew that. I was the one offering flowers to strangers.
You offered flowers to strangers?
Yeah, this is me. So he received a text message from the guy inside Iran saying that, go and knock the door, then take her to the backyard garden. If I had opened the door, I would have just given him a big smile and said, yes, let's go to my garden. And then he wanted to just kill me?
Did he actually knock on your door?
Yes.
Her home security camera actually caught him on her porch trying to get in. Eventually, he took off, but was pulled over for running a stop sign. That's when the police found this in his car. He's been in custody awaiting trial ever since. But here's what's interesting. Neither he nor 2 other men the prosecutors say were hired for the job were Iranian. Like him, they were Eastern European, and, as is becoming a trademark of Iran's shadow war, they were criminals.
They were all from criminal syndicate. This is what the Islamic Republic is really good at, like using drug dealers, using criminals to do their dirty job on the Western soil.
And maybe have deniability.
Exactly.
We didn't do it.
That's the point.
So why did they use proxies?
To have somebody who is not being tracked by intelligence or security agencies for this.
Matt Jukes, head of counterterrorism policing in Britain, says this is not just an American problem. In the UK, they have foiled 15 Iranian kidnapping and assassination attempts since last year.
I've been involved in national security policing for over 20 years. What we've seen in the last 18 months is a real acceleration.
We have been told that a lot of these criminal gangs hire other criminal gangs, and then maybe a third group.
I think we're always going to see this collaboration between criminal organisations. We know that this will not always be a direct line from a state organisation to a threat to a potential kidnap. And
this recording was given to us by a foreign intelligence agency. It shows how Iran recruits criminals.
I received a call from the IRGC, the Revolutionary Guard.
This is an Iranian smuggler from Urmia, a town near the Turkish border. He reveals to the foreign agents that he was approached by Iran's Revolutionary Guard with a deal. They'll turn a blind eye to his smuggling if he helps them.
Their request was that I find people who could work for them. What kind of work? Anything. Like catching someone for us so they can be beaten up or gotten rid of.
This surveillance video shows him recruiting a fellow smuggler for the task. The man in white is Mansour Rassouli, an alleged drug dealer. He agreed to arrange assassinations throughout Europe for the Iranian government for money. But a few weeks later, Rassouli was kidnapped at night and interrogated in a car, reportedly by Israeli intelligence. They extracted this cell phone confession where Rassouli admits he was paid $150,000 up front and promised $1 million if he killed 3 people for the Iranians.
One is an Israeli at the embassy in Istanbul, Turkey. Another one is an American general in Germany. And one is a journalist in France.
The French target was identified as philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy, a vocal critic of the regime in Tehran. The identity of the American general remains a mystery. The plot to kill the 3 was prevented, but in recent years, Iranian dissidents were successfully kidnapped and smuggled to Iran. Several were executed. They've succeeded in Europe. They haven't succeeded in the United States, even though we know there are targets.
Right.
So many American officials and others are being targeted. Why is it not a bigger issue?
Look, I think the targeting of American citizens by a hostile foreign government is very close to an act of war.
What would happen if they succeeded in assassinating someone like you, a well-known former official?
Well, I wouldn't like to find out for myself or for the country, but why are we sitting here quietly talking about this when they're in effect saying they're going to commit acts of war against American citizens on American soil?
Does the fact that Iran feels emboldened to come after our citizens, does it mean we've lost our deterrence?
Well, I think we have lost deterrence, and I think this also goes to an unwillingness on the part of the administration to confront the Ayatollahs in a way that they understand.
They can challenge U.S. government on U.S. soil without any punishment. Then what's the reason to stop?
Well, there are sanctions against them.
Sanction is not sufficient. Sanction is not helping.
What do you want us to do, drop a bomb?
No. Look, when you negotiate with the killers, you're empowering them.
The Biden administration didn't respond to our request for an interview.
The Islamic Republic...
When Masih Ahmadinejad was called to testify before Congress about Iran in September, she said that unless the administration's policy changes, her life will continue to be in danger.
I believe that when I'm not in the spotlight, when media like you are not paying attention to me, finally they're gonna come after me.
While she now has the freedom to speak her mind in America, she does not have the freedom to live where she wants. Masi and her family have had to go into hiding under FBI protection.
It's like, wow, the government from my own country trying to kill me, but my adopted country trying to protect me. You have to be an Iranian to survive assassination plot, to understand that how it feels to survive in America and to have the platform and to criticize the US government.
You're tearing up. Tell me why you're tearing up.
Because people in my country get killed for criticizing, get shot in head for the crime of criticizing.
Coming up, Scott Pelley sat down with the most prominent leader of Iran's opposition just as war began. Just one day after Operation Epic Fury killed the supreme leader of the Islamic Republic, 60 Minutes correspondent Scott Pelley sat down with Reza Pahlavi, Iran's crown prince and the son of Iran's last Shah.
The United States and Israel conducted a second day of strikes on targets across Iran. Iran's supreme leader has been killed. Tehran has retaliated with missile attacks on Israel, neighboring countries, and U.S. military bases in the region. At least 3 American service members have been killed. Scott Pelley is in Paris following events, including what could be next for Iran.
Tonight, the most prominent member of the Iranian opposition says he believes the Iranian regime is collapsing and he would like to lead a transition that makes Iran safe for the world. 65-year-old Reza Pahlavi is the son of the former king, or Shah of Iran, who was deposed in 1979 by revolutionaries and hardline Islamic clerics. In that year of revolution, Pahlavi was 18 years old and living in Lubbock, Texas, where the U.S. Air Force was training him to be a fighter pilot. He was never able to go home. He has lived in exile 47 years, mostly in the United States. But tonight, he's in Paris, where we asked him if he wants to be king, what Iran's policy should be toward Israel and nuclear weapons. We started our interview with the news that the supreme leader of Iran, Ayatollah Khamenei, had been killed in the opening hours of the war.
It is definitely a sort of earth-shattering event in the sense that when people identify the entire monstrosity of a regime that is depicted ultimately by the chief monster of these monsters, when he's gone, the minute such a personality disappears, it's like elation. It was like, oh my God, it has finally occurred. Maybe this is it. This is our chance now.
You call him a monster. What do you mean?
Well, I mean, ever since this regime has taken over, how many Iranians' lives have been lost? I don't think you can have an example of such level of atrocity ever in the history of Iran, or at least contemporary Iran, that has occurred under this regime. And this is all because of Ali Khamenei's insistence and persistence to keep himself and his mafia regime in power at the expense of the Iranian people. I don't know how else can you depict it other than being true monsters in the real sense of the word.
This past January, Iranians poured into the streets. Pahlavi urged them on, and hundreds of thousands marched. The regime gunned down an estimated 20,000 citizens. The massacre was a prelude to war. This is video overnight after the announcement of the death of the Ayatollah in the city of Isfahan. What does that mean to you?
That means that finally we are ready to go back to the streets, even though I've cautioned them that for now you better take care of your own safety and stay at home. The time will come to go back on the streets. But then again, you see that despite that, people still are brave enough to say, to hell with it. Because to us, it's liberation. To us, it's like a humanitarian intervention to protect lives that could otherwise continue to be lost. it gives the Iranian people a real opportunity now when they see the end of this regime that was always bound to collapse. Whether there was an intervention or not, I want to make sure your audience understand that we were prepared to fight the fight. There was too much blood between us and this regime. We were committed to fight regardless of outside intervention. They're thanking President Trump for actually standing on his word and acting upon his word.
Do you actually believe this regime could fall after almost 50 years?
Of course.
Prince Reza Pahlavi told us he wants to lead Iran in a transition to democracy. You don't want to be king?
I'm not running for office. I'm not.
Are you saying in this interview that you wouldn't lead Iran?
That's a different thing. They trust me as a transitional leader, not as the future king or future president or future whatever. I'm totally focused on my mission in life, which is let me bring the country to a point that they can make that free choice. That will be enough for me having said mission accomplished.
You imagine peace with Israel?
Of course. In modern history, Iran actually gave refuge to Jews that were escaping the Nazis during the Second World War, giving them refuge and sanctuary in Iran. The strategic importance of having a partnership with Israel is critical.
What are the principles on which you would build a new Iran?
I think what today unites us are four core principles that I think is the subject of how we can work together towards that end. Number one is Iran's territorial integrity. Number two is the clear separation of religion from state, which is a prerequisite to democracy, and we paid the price understanding what it means to live under a religious dictatorship. Number three is, of course, equality of all citizens under the law and individual liberties. And most importantly, the process, a democratic process to allow the people to elect and decide what their future system of governance should be.
What would happen to the nuclear weapons program?
I think it should be totally dismantled. I don't think Iran has any need to pursue a military weaponizing of the nuclear program.
Pahlavi's father was the last king. Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was close to the United States, but he brutally suppressed opposition and showered friends with lavish wealth. In 1979, he left Iran amid rising political tension, and a hardline cleric, Ayatollah Khomeini, returned from exile to lead a revolution. Iranians blamed the U.S. for supporting the king, and revolutionaries overran the U.S. embassy in Tehran and held 52 Americans hostage for 444 days. Your father's reign is remembered for repression and opulent wealth. And I wonder why you believe the people would welcome you now.
Well, that's perhaps one narrative. But when you look at a lot of people who were at the time living that era, they were telling me, you know what? We recognize where we were and where we are now. And today we want to be with you. We support you. We back you. And there were people who were in those so-called prisons that were notorious or repressive or whatever you call. They were in prison under the previous regime.
People were killed in your father's regime.
Look, my father left Iran voluntarily to avoid bloodshed. And he said, I'm a king. A king doesn't build his throne on the blood of his own people. If the nation today wants me out, I would leave. I will not turn my guns on them.
You have been out of the country for nearly 50 years. Why would the people want you?
If they thought that was an issue, I don't think they'll be calling my name by the millions on the streets of Iran. I think that part of the reason people trust me only is because they cannot associate me in any way or form to the revolution or to be part of this regime. The very same people who today are in the streets, all the young kids that are getting shot and massacred by this regime, are a generation that turns to their parents and tell them, what the hell were you thinking? What was that madness to think that this Khomeini character is going to be our solution and our path to freedom? And look at where we are now. But from the day I left, I never left Iran. Iran had been on my mind every single year of my life, when I wake up in the morning, the first thing that is in my mind is Iran.
Pahlavi told us he is in touch with the Trump administration and members of Congress. What is your message to President Trump?
My message to President Trump is that I'm here to echo and join millions of my compatriots inside and outside of Iran to thank him for having done and having the courage to do what is not easy, but intervene. And he will go down in the annals of Iranian history as the most celebrated foreign leader that changed the ball game and changed the world as a result.
In January, President Trump said this about you, quote, "He seems very nice, but I don't know how he'd play within his own country. I don't know whether or not his country would accept his leadership. And certainly if they would, that would be fine with me." You don't seem to have President Trump's wholehearted support.
Well, first of all, I don't think that somebody in my position will ever expect to have an official endorsement of a foreign government or a foreign leader. What I do know now is that millions of Iranians inside Iran and outside of Iran are calling my name. They recognize in me the person uniquely placed to play a role of transitional leadership. Not running for office, because that's not what I'm doing, but to be a bridge to that destiny.
Unrest has been building for months. Last June, U.S. and Israeli forces attacked Iran's nuclear facilities. And in 2022, one of the largest uprisings in the nearly 50-year history of the regime erupted. Iran's morality police arrested a 22-year-old woman accusing her of failing to cover her hair. She was killed in custody, and crowds moved into the streets to demand an end to the regime. Security forces killed more than 500, arrested 22,000, and blacked out the internet. Much of the population has been seething right through today. When you see the courage on the streets that we're witnessing now, I wonder how that moves you.
I think it's the ultimate definition of heroism. Do you remember that lone Chinese student in Tiananmen Square standing in front of that tank? I remember that image. Let me give you another visual that has been going viral on the cyberspace. That firefighter who was carrying a wounded person that was shot on the streets just a few weeks ago, and they shot him to death. That image, exemplified that.
It's a tremendous thing to witness. Pahlavi told us there are units in the military and police who have signaled to him that they would turn on the hardline government. He says many, but not all troops, could be given amnesty in a process of national reconciliation.
And in fact, it will be a clear indication that this is the time for them to make a decision. Do you want to join this time with the people, or do you want to stand with the sinking ship?
It's possible that this interview will penetrate the internet blackout, and I wonder what you say to the Iranian people.
Have faith in yourselves. You are a nation with an ancient civilization. I know how proud you are of your heritage, how important Iran is to all of them. And I always said to them, I said, you know what? I know you're always hoping for a better future. What I would like you to start doing, and I've started to answer my call, is instead of hoping, start believing that it can be done.
And that brings us to today, with the future of Iran very much in question. For more award-winning investigative reporting and interviews only the team at 60 Minutes can offer, go to the 60 Minutes channel any time of day on the free CBS News app, on Paramount Plus, or wherever you stream. I'm Adriana Diaz. Thank you so much for watching.